Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and we will be beginning shortly with a live stream discussion with regard to the work which is called Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan. Before we begin, and we, as I say, will begin momentarily, could someone just let me know in the chat about the sound? I hope the sound is okay. I hope things are picking up okay. Just let me know, technically speaking, if we are good to go. Great, thank you very much. Great, thank you. Mike is here. Hello. Greetings from Las Vegas in my best Shatner impression. Oh, my friend, your Shatner impression must be splendid indeed. And as I say, it is light years, head and shoulders beyond my own Kirk impression, which is very, very poor indeed. But I beg your pardon in advance because I might bring in the William Shatner Star Trek Captain Kirk, or I should say, excuse me, Admiral Kirk, Admiral Kirk impression later today. So I beg your pardon in advance. My dear friend Mike, it's always good to see you. Analysis of Sci-Fi is here. Hello. Your favorite is Star Trek 6. Yes. You have not experienced Shakespeare until you read him in the original Klingon. I look forward to talking about that one too. Yes. Zyrother is here. Hello. Jerome Weaselberry. Hello, my dear friend. I will get back to you. Yes, the Kolinar necklace. Well done. Well done, my friend. And thank you so much for that. Brian is here. Seth is here. Oh, yes, we will talk about Sauce for the Goose. Yes. DVD Mike 007 is here. Hello. Great. Eric is here. Nice to see you. Cooper Glover 1972 is here. Brian is from, you're saying greetings from Columbus, Ohio. Yes. Oh, wow. Very nice. Very nice. I, um, I've been to Ohio many times. I haven't been there recently, unfortunately, but I have been there many times. There was a period, a brief period, but there was a period where my parents were living near, where they were living in a place called Copley, Ohio, which I understand is somewhat close to Akron, Ohio. So I had the occasion to visit them when they were living there. It was a really lovely place, and so I'm I'm very happy to see you. And Ohio is a very lovely area. So Columbus, Ohio. Thank you so much, Brian. And Christian's hobby blog. Hello. Yes, I just saw your Instagram post. Thank you so much, my dear friend. Scott is here. Hello. Great to see you again. Matt is here. Hello. Oh my goodness, so many people here. I'm so happy to see all of you. Jared is here. Oh goodness. Damn fool is here. Uh, in full Shatnerian. Hello, everyone. This should be an interesting stream. I will save my own impressions for later. But as I was talking to Mike just a moment ago, damn fool, your impressions are always top notch, and your William Shatner impression is I'm sure it's one of the best out there. So, Goo Lagoon. Hello from Maine. Hello, Maine. I've also visited Maine on a number of occasions, and it's a lovely place. I would love to be able to visit again one day very soon. So, okay, so let's see. James Gum is also here. And you say, I adore your channel, my friend. Well, that's very kind of you. Wow. Well, I'm honored. I'm honored, James. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you. Let Lemon is here. Hello. I hope I didn't miss anyone. If I did, I apologize. Let me now turn to the chat itself. Let's begin in earnest, and I will return to the live chat in due course. So before we begin, let me just we haven't even begun yet, so let us begin. So, greetings from Tokyo, my dear, dear friends. This is Daisuke, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your very valuable schedules to stop by where here at this channel during this live stream. Thank you so much. Today, it is the occasion of talking about this work, which is called Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, excuse me, I could barely get it out. Maybe someone saying something about how Khan is so ever present, excuse me. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So it's the 1982 work. It is the second in the feature film series of this story, this universe, this great set of characters, which is Star Trek. And we have a film which has a very interesting production history, but the director at the helm, as it were, or who is taking the con, is Nicholas Meyer. And we have the return of a number of people, plus some quote unquote new faces. But indeed, among the new faces, we also have a return of sorts. And there are even more linkages and connections that are going on with the series Star Trek, while at the same time forging a type of path within the cinematic realm, within the world of the feature film presentations of Star Trek. That's paving the way for so many things that are, I think, even now, very much part of the their look and feel and activities that we have come to know as Star Trek. So this is, again, another important, stellar, and magnificent work that stands so much in the world of Star Trek, and indeed in the world of science fiction entertainment and the world of 1980s films. It stands so strongly in those various hats. And so it is going to be my great pleasure to speak with you today about just some thoughts and comments I have about this. And also for me, I'm looking forward tremendously to hear from you in the live chat here. And so that is available. So before we begin, in earnest, let me say that this is meant to be a very a casual discussion of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It is not meant to be in any way a type of comprehensive review or academic analysis of the sort. It is just a casual talk. And so if there are points that I get wrong, or if there are points that maybe I haven't spoken about, I apologize very much so. If you want to have a discussion on the film, again, the live chat is available to you. So please, I encourage you to let me know where I've messed up, or if I have, as I say, skipped over something that you feel is in need of some very important attention. Please, of course, I am giving you the space to talk about that, please. And I would love to hear from you. And as I say, this is so much a learning experience for me. And you are my teachers and my guides and my companions. And so I am always looking forward to your insights and your perspectives on these things. So please, I encourage you to do so. And the live chat, as I say, is available. So, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one other thing too, which is the discussion will therefore, of course, be spoiler filled. There will be detailed discussions, including some very key plot points that occur with regard to this film. So, if you have not seen Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, then I encourage you or I suggest that you maybe turn off this live stream right now. I don't want to spoil it for you. But you can turn this off, and then you can watch the film in your own schedule. And then when you have finished watching the film, and if you want to join us, please feel free to join us at the live chat, or the live stream, excuse me. This should be uploaded as a video after the fact with the live chat, etc., as an optional function. So you can always return to this at any time you are ready. Again, I don't want to spoil it for you, for anyone who hasn't seen the film. And then what was I going to say? Yes. Oh, yes, I forgot. I apologize. The next thing is the live chat. As I was indicating earlier, the live chat is going to be available for all. And so I will do my best to keep up with it, but it goes by very quickly. And so I cannot guarantee that I'll be able to touch upon every single person in the chat, or every single comment in the chat. So I really apologize, but I will do my utmost to keep up with and to say hello to as many people as possible. If I miss you, again, I apologize. Really, I do. It's no ill will intended on my part. Please believe me. That's really the case. Again, I'm only a human. Or to borrow a phrase from Kirk, using the wonderful lip movement, human. So we'll talk about that scene later, of course. Very key scene. And then, so again, I will do my utmost to keep up with the chat and to touch base with all of you. But if I miss you or if I overlook you and your comment, please, please forgive me. And again, there's no ill will intended on my part. Also, if you have any questions for me about this film, I can't guarantee to be able to answer everything, but I will do my best. If you have any non-Star Trek 2 related questions, then please feel free to leave behind a comment in a video. I have been again, I have been very bad in over the past, say, couple weeks with getting back to comments. I haven't been responding to comments, but I will be returning to that. I promise. I promise. So but if you do have any non-Star Trek related question for me, you can always leave a comment in another video and I will do my best to respond to that. And then, of course, with the live chat and with the internet and things, I understand sometimes there might be some disagreements, there might be some somewhat, how should I put it? Yeah, there might be some disagreements and the like. And so if there are any of that, if there's any of that kind of activity in the live chat, etc., then I will of course do my best to address everything with a sense of respect towards you and everything that you say. So, and if I cannot meet your expectations, I really, 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 really apologize. But as I say, I will do my utmost to listen to you. And so, and I know that everyone in the chat who is participating, and they've done many times before, and you've looked out for my channel many times in the past, and you've been always so attentive and so willing to listen, and you've been so respectful towards me. And so I always want to thank you so much for your kindness and generosity. And I know that you will continue that spirit of mutual respect towards others uh, today during the discussion, as you have always done for me and this channel in the past, my dear friend. So thank you so much. So thank you so much for that. And last but not least, there are connections with the world of Star Trek. However, I do also appreciate that for a number of people, this might be the first time watching this film, and there might be still some early days in one's Star Trek journey. So I completely get that. So don't worry, I will keep that in mind when I go through with this conversation. So there's no prerequisite, there's no requirement or demand that you need to know everything that happens with, say, for instance, an episode of Star Trek called Space Seed. I mean, if you've seen that episode or other episodes, that's great. If not, that is still okay. I think there's much room for a discussion, and I will be sure to I will be sure to keep my comments as accessible as possible with the discussion here. And that is also my way to say that I am not at all a Star Trek expert, but I have seen this film a number of times. So that's my general basis for this. So that is the preliminary comments. And so let us continue. But before, I will say hello one more time to the wonderful chat going on here. So hello, let's see. Okay, Cooper Glover, thank you so much. Thank you so much, as always, for looking out for the chat here. Erwin is here, I see. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see here. Okay. Here we go. Sorry about this. Okay, here. Okay, I'm now scrolling up. Eric Pieper says, is it too much to ask for a Criterion release of Wrath of Khan? Interesting. Let's see. Seth says, great to be here. I'd never seen this film in its entirety until yesterday and believe it lives up to its hype. I love Khan's distinctly 80s ragtag space crew. Oh, yes, we will talk about the crew, the Botany Bay, or as Chekhov says, Botany Bay. Botany Bay. Oh, no. Yes. Chekhov, what's the matter with you? Come on, hurry. Yeah. We'll talk about the Botany Bay sequence and the great crew of the Botany Bay. And Cooper Glover says, Daisuke, I saw this film in the theater. I wanted to see it bad when it came out, and my father, my brother, and I saw it when we couldn't see E.T. because it was sold out. Eric Pieper says, originally titled Star Trek II, The Undiscovered Country. Yes, yes, and this is also a link to the thinking of Nicholas Meyer and what his intention was, as he indicates and as has been remarked upon, as you know, I know, this is the reference to Shakespeare, and specifically Shakespeare and Hamlet, the tragedy of Hamlet, and specifically, right, Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1, the famous soliloquy, to be or not to be, that is the question, right? The undiscovered country, right? This is a reference to death, right? Right? Is it to be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by posing in them to die to sleep no more. Yes. But we'll see the undiscovered country again very soon. Seth Walsh, Khan's slow reveal as he takes his mask off. Perfect. Yes, this is a reference to the beginning, or not the beginning, but sort of the beginning, uh, when the Terrell and Chekhov are surveying SETI Alpha 6 or 5, or we'll talk about that difference too. Yes, well done. Christian's Hobby Block says this movie probably has one of the best acting by all the actors and actresses in the series. Yes, it's a really wonderful collection. Kirstie Alley is here. Um, Incidentally, anyone who's a fan of Kirstie Alley's performance as Savick here, and the Look Who's Talking films. Look Who's Talking Now. Yes, that has a right. It is Look Who's Talking Now that has that wonderful callback to Kirstie Alley playing a Vulcan, right? So, um, Cooper Glover, 1972 says, the game's not over, Daisuke. Yes, I can imagine that being said in the Ricardo Montalban voice, that distinctive, regal sounding, majestic voice of Khan. Khan. We'll talk about the Khan calls too, and the top. I guess it's three. The top three, or top four, top five, I suppose. Khan calls in the film, and let's see. Mike Eli says, just the thought of Khan always makes my ears tingle. This film really creeped me out as a kid in a wonderfully fantastic way that is interesting. Are you speaking of ears, and as a reference also to not just the shape of the ears of Vulcan, but also what happens with the so-called little creatures that we also see here? In any event, my friend, yes, well said. Well said indeed. Let's see. Oh, Erwin says, very quickly passing by, as I will not join this discussion because I have to leave to Amsterdam in the early morning, but I will watch this discussion later. Yes, so see you later, Erwin, and I hope all is well. And talk to you again very soon. Yes. Um, let's see. Okay. Matt Flaherty says, buried alive, buried alive. Yes. Yes, thank you so much. And Jerome Weaselberry, our dear friend, don't forget to subscribe to Jerome Weaselberry if you haven't already. One of the best channels out there. You see, Daisuke just casually rattling off one of the most famous soliloquies ever. No big deal. I memorized that as a high school student because it was an assignment, and so I messed up a little. I messed up some parts. I didn't plan to I didn't plan to talk about the, well, I guess I should have, but I didn't plan to talk about the soliloquy of Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. It's also referred to in, of course, Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, but that is a tale for another day, of course. So let us now speak about just the introduction of my opening salvo, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This is a film from the early 80s, 82. And I was, as I've mentioned earlier, I was born in 1979, the year of Star Trek the Motion Picture. I was never able to see Star Trek the Motion Picture in the theater. I was never able to see Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan at all in the theater. I will speak about my theater experiences when we talk about the next film, going and beyond, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. But until that time, let me say that it was Star Trek II that was, again, one of those things in my life, early in my cinema experience, my cinema journey. It was one of those films that I just cannot remember not ever having seen. So it has always been there. It has always been there. It came, I think, in the form of two sources. The first being the VHS tape. It was the VHS tape with that great, maybe wonderful, that great type of sand colored motif to it on the front. And then I think it was this, right? This, which is reproduced here. So this, I believe, was that VHS cover back in the day. And then in the back, if you remember, you had on the cover, you'd have the write-up with, I think, 2 columns, and then you'd have 2 pictures at least. And I think one of the pictures, if I remember correctly, was an angle on the bridge of the Reliant of Khan, and his face, half of his face had essentially burnt because of the attack or the counterattack by the Enterprise on the Reliant during the Mutara Nebula phase in the climax. And so that was one. And I believe the other picture might have been the crew or the people of the Botany Bay standing outside in the sand and in their sand suits. And so I think those are the 2 pictures. But in any case, that's what it was like back in the day, right? We had those VHS tapes, and then you had those 2 pictures. And I would always try to watch the film to catch where those pictures might pop up in the course of the proceedings. So that would always be a fun thing. So I always remember Khan's essentially half melted away face in a really grotesque fashion, but that was one thing. And it always reminded me too, it was like, and his hand too was also, his free hand was also injured apparently, and quite bloodied up. And so I always thought maybe that's something that happened to his hitherto other gloved hand. Remember when he reveals himself in on SETI Alpha 6 or 5, again, we'll talk about that. He takes off one glove, but he leaves one other glove remaining. So, so in any case, so it was VHS that was one of the first sources for me. The other source was, it was shown on TV, network TV, and I was living in the United States at the time. And this wouldn't have been precisely at 1982, would have been some years later. So, but still, it would be showing on network TV every once in a while. And so I still remember I don't remember everything, but I remember some images and feelings and little clips of the TV promo for the network broadcast of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. You'd see clips, you'd see the bit with Kirk and the shot of him standing as the door would open, and it would be that wonderful coat, that one with that wonderful that coat that he wears in when he is on the team that's investigating and looking at the Regular One station, which is right. We see a little bit of Star Trek the Motion Picture reuse here. There's a lot of TMP reuse. Here we have an upside down thing, which is a very interesting reuse of a prop. But that makes me always, when I get to that sequence early on in Star Trek the Motion Picture, I always want to go like this and just look at it upside down and see, oh, that's the regular one. But anyway, This was one of the sequences in that TV promo. I think it was maybe ABC, or I think not NBC. I think it was ABC. Again, I don't remember. Please correct me if I'm wrong. For anyone who's a TV historian or buff, the and it was the bit with Khan, and he's speaking over the communications there to Terrell, kill him, and he's showing his muscles and that thing around his wrist, and it was Khan. It was all this stuff. So this was a TV promo, and so I was uh, I again, it was just in my blood. It was in my very maybe fiber, my being, and I have never been able to shake off the experience of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Now, be that as it may, notwithstanding the fact that I have seen this countless times, and I have seen this since I was very, very young, and notwithstanding the fact that I can't remember a time not having seen this film, even now, every time I watch this film, I get chills. Every time I watch this film, I just marvel at the what's going on, and I am in awe, and I am emotionally drained by the end of it in an incredibly satisfying way. And I know that many other people over the years who are Star Trek fans or fans of cinema have expressed maybe similar sentiments in a much more eloquent way, much more better way than I could ever hope to achieve. Nevertheless, I am part of that chorus of fans of this film, and I think I will always be. I cannot imagine a time when I will never like this film. I will always love this film, and it has its flaws. I will try to maybe speak a little bit to those, but films have flaws, and even in discussing flaws, there is a lot of fun in doing that. So I will try to speak a little bit about that in a little bit more detail later today. But before we go to that, let us just go quickly to the chat here, and then let's see. Okay. Oh, Raymond Rodriguez is here. Hello, it's nice to see you. Great. Cooper Lover 1972 says, I could care less for Cheers. Cheers. Oh, yes. Um, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. I was always I'm sorry. I know I said I wouldn't talk about anything other than Star Trek. I just have to make this one point about Cheers. I was always fascinated by the opening credits of Cheers, and it has the montage of these old time, maybe like lithograph photos or something, and it just time to everybody knows, and everybody knows, the end, and that guy with that guy. I was always fascinated by that guy, the guy that they end with, that opening titles montage. But anyway, yes, Cheers, and of course there's Kirstie Alley. Mike Eli says, yes, the earworms, that always gets me. Yes. Mountains Out of Molehills is here. Hello. Let's see. You say, love the artwork of the director's cut Blu-ray. Oh, yes. And here is that coat. Thank you very much, Mountains Out of Molehills, for mentioning, because yes, that coat is right here. This is the coat that I was referring to, that great coat. There are so many great coats in Star Trek. I cannot wait until we get to part 3. The coats of Star Trek. That should be its own. The top 10 coats of Star Trek. So there's got to be this. Well, we'll talk about that. Sulu's coat. Oh my god. Anyway, and don't get me started on Dr. McCoy. That great. Okay. Let's see. And Eric Pieper says, I believe some of the 70mm prints don't have the 2 in the title. That's interesting. Let's see. Seth says, I always love hearing you speak about your memories for movies in such detail that you include your memories of the VHS box you remember watching. Well, that's very kind of you. Yes, thank you. Scott Johansson says, fun fact, Ricardo Montalban did his scenes alone, unfortunately, when he was talking to Kirk. Yes, they were, according to him and others on making of documentaries and the sort, they were shooting their respective scenes in different places. And so we understand there was never a scene of them shot in the same physical space. And so that is its own interesting aspect in and of itself. Yes, Marco is here. Hello. Yes, they were production stills, not actually in the movie, I guess. Yes, yes. That often is the case, is it not? Although sometimes those VHS pictures, sorry, the pictures that were used on the VHS box back covers sometimes were production stills, but sometimes they were actually from the film itself or something. I don't know what the overlap is, but Chiggers, hello. It's nice to see you. You say, which cut of the film do you prefer? I do like I guess it's the theatrical cut or the original cut that I know. I know it has the director's cut with some slightly extended parts here. There's more there's more stuff about Peter Preston. Don't get me wrong. I love me some engineer shipmate action. I get that, and Peter Preston is his own whirlwind of energy, as we see in the director's cut. Fearless, and so don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Peter Preston, but sorry, Peter Preston fans. I'll have to go with theatrical. Although we do get to see some Peter Preston scenes in action there. So, but yes. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Of course, it was the wonderful, the wonderful. The director's cut is wonderful because you have these moments that are what is it? You have these moments that are slight extensions within scenes, like maybe there's a little bit where Dr. McCoy, when he's in the apartment or when he's in that wonderful apartment of Kirk, talking about the glasses and his eyes. And there's a bit later where they're climbing the ladder chute or something in the Enterprise, and they're getting, after they've come back from Regula, and they're about ready to enter the Mutara Nebula for the final battle. And you got the bit where they weren't able to restore full power. They only have partial main power. And that's the best we could do in 2 hours. And then they climb up the chute, which is the same ladder, I think, that we'll see Spock climb down in the later final moments. But I think during that moment, the director's cut, something's like, oh, he's my son. You're talking about David. And Spock says fascinating, or we hear him say fascinating. So those are some little things along the way that we see in the director's cut. It's a great cut, but I think my heart goes with the original cut because it's the one that I've seen so many times, and I know there's so much there. Incidentally, of course, there are still bits that are part of even other things that are not remaining, I think, in either situation. And so there is this very famous part. Well, for those who really know Star Trek, you'll know that when Kirk and Sulu and company are making the final arrival in the shuttle to the Enterprise, and this is after we see the scene with Chekhov and Terrell and the eels, it cuts to the lovely da-da-da-da-da and da-da. Everything's like, oh, dark and pleasant. Oh, the eels, oh, that's better. Where, tell me, why are you here? Tell me, where can I find James Kirk? And then, la 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 la. Oh, here's Kirk reading A Tale of Two Cities. Da, 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 da. And it's going to the the space shuttle, or not the space shuttle, but it's the shuttle to the Enterprise, which is very interestingly very similar to what we saw in the motion picture. There's a lot of motion picture stuff, but in any case, we understand why that was done, and it's done rather seamlessly. And it's not always the case with all the spaceship scenes. We understand that. In any case, we see them, and then um, we see Kirk talking to people in the shuttle, saying, I hate inspections. And we see Sulu, I'm delighted. Any chance to go aboard the Enterprise? You see a little bit of his mouth moving. But it cuts to another scene, I think, outside with the wonderful James Horner music going on. And so, for those who know Star Trek, you'll know that in the novelization, and even if you search around online, you might be able to find some evidence of, say, audio of what could have been or what had originally been planned to be that little bit in that particular scene, and a little bit of information about what could have been Sulu or Captain Sulu, perhaps, at the end of that month. And we might have heard a little bit about what his plans would have been with regard to another ship that we will see later in the series. But in any case, that is an interesting bit of truth. Also, there are some interesting possibilities. As Spock likes to say, I always like to think there are always possibilities. Right? That's how Kirk refers to what Spock told him. I always think that there are always possibilities. Right? So the possibilities also of the relationship between David and Savick. Right? We also know about that as well. But in any case, yes. What was the question? Yes, of course. The director's cut is great. I maybe my heart goes with the theatrical version, the original version. Yes, that heavy winter coat, as analysis of sci-fi says. Yes, that coat is pretty cool. Yes, I agree. Um, let's see. Gosh. Okay, Christian's Hobby Blog says, was debating on rewatching the original episode introducing Khan. Okay, this is great. Thank you so much for reminding me about this. And this is, let us now go here. So, this film, this film is uh, another fascinating example of what to do with a story that is obviously, and I think quite rightly so, reliant on past material or past storylines, and how to present that in a way that is also something that could also be accessed by people who haven't necessarily seen the episode in question. Now, that episode in question is Space Seed. It's called Space Seed from the first season. This is also very important, the first season. And because of also the introduction when Chekhov appears in the series. There's a little bit of it's a kind of a famous. I wouldn't call it. Some people have been able to explore. I'll get to that momentarily. But we have that Space Seed episode, and this is we have uh, the kind of introduction of the Botany Bay, the and Khan and the story on the Enterprise, and there's a character there who's named Marla MacGyver's, etc. So there's that whole stuff that goes on. And then the idea is that after those events, we have 15 years later or so, we have the events of what we see here, sometime, as the opening credits tell us, in the 23rd century, yes. But we have the events here. So this is, in a sense, Space Seed 2, not just Star Trek 2, but Space Seed 2. However, I can say that one doesn't necessarily have to watch Space Seed in order to be able to not just watch this film, but enjoy this film to its fullest. There are some references when Khan says, for instance, when talking about the Seti eels and talking about how it killed so many of his people, including my beloved wife. Right? And so I was doing my best Seti eel impression there, by the way, for anyone who's interested. But okay, yeah. So he does mention his wife. We can probably assume that that is a reference to MacGyvers, but of course, maybe we don't know what happened, but maybe he went to the planet and then maybe they broke up and he met someone. We don't know. But the assumption is, yeah, it's probably her. And then there's also a moment later in the film where Khan and Kirk are talking over the communications, right? A very famous exchange. And he says, Khan says, I will leave you as you left me, as you left her, marooned for all eternity at the center of a dead planet, buried alive, buried alive. And what does Kirk say? He says, we'll save that for later. Okay. But yes, so he says there, Khan says there, I will leave you as you left me, as you left her. So this is also probably a reference to that character, MacGyver's character. In any case, there are those hints and clues about what happened. But there is a great way that the film does pick up the pieces. And for instance, when Terrell and Chekhov are surveying what they believe to be SETI Alpha 6, and they find the wreckage. They go inside and they see this array, this essentially this bunker, these cooked up bunkers of sorts, and they see the library, Moby Dick, etc. And they also see that great, I guess it's checkers, I don't know, that checkers game. It looks like checkers or chess or something. I don't think it's chess. It's probably checkers, but 23rd century checkers. If it's not checkers, let me know. Maybe it's something else. I forget. But in any case, so we got that game, and he says Botany Bay, Botany Bay. Oh no! So he understands that something happened before, and then Khan confronts them, and Khan gives us that wonderful overview of what happened. And he says, that he and it's not just him, but also uh, 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 Chekhov counteracts or counters him by saying, you try to, you betrayed, essentially saying, assuming, suggesting that he betrayed his trust by trying to steal his ship and murder at the time Captain Kirk. And so that has its seeds in that particular story, but I think it's summed up so well in the exchange later in the Regula cave with Dr. Carol Marcus, who doesn't know these events of Space Seed in the episode, and she says very bluntly, she says, what? So I don't understand what's going on. What's going on? Who is Khan? And that's a great question. And I think it's Kirk who says that's a long story. And then David says, I think we have a lot of time. The assumption being that there will be strength there for eternity. Although if eternity is marked by hours, it's only eternity times two, as we know. In any case, yes, I thought that question by Dr. Marcus was brilliant because it just says, who's Khan? Essentially saying, what's the backstory? And then it's Kirk saying, it's a long story. It's a long story, but something happened, and now we're going to deal with the ramifications, right? So that's essentially all you need to know for those who haven't necessarily watched the original episode. It's great that you have, and it's great that if you've watched other episodes of Star Trek, that's for sure. That's for sure. However, it's not a complete and total, hermetically sealed, must of a prerequisite for watching this film, in my opinion. It's handled just enough to be able to do that. And I think that was a really well designed thing, especially considering the people who made the film and the powers that be behind the scenes in terms of Harv Bennett and Nicholas Meyer in particular. And so just their say maybe they didn't know, and they acknowledged this. And Nicholas Meyer, for example, famously acknowledges in a lot of the documentaries how he didn't necessarily know Star Trek. He said his father knew about the ears of Spock, and so that's why he mentions the opening of the film, and we get this shot of the screen and pulling back the camera, and we see the ears, and you hear that great comment on one of the commentary tracks from Meyer himself. But he also professes to not necessarily knowing the world and lore of Star Trek, but he essentially came in at the behest of one of the producers, and really did this marvelous job of essentially rewriting the various script stories that was there at the present, just putting it all together and essentially pleasing everyone. Although I think William Shatner was a little bit displeased, at least he was vocally so, or at least according to Nicholas Meyer, in terms of how the Kirk character was being handled with regard to his age and his feelings about his self and his station in life and growing old. The idea of growing old as being one of the main core themes of the film: growing old, feeling young, rebirth, transformation, and death. So, but I understand that once those feelings and disagreements subsided among all the key players, and it was Nicholas Meyer at the helm. And the rest, of course, as they say, is history. But I think it's a really important point to keep in mind that not all the people behind the scenes were necessarily steeped into the lore of Star Trek, but I think that also shows in the way in which, as I was indicating earlier, the earlier stuff is being handled. Much like we saw, I would say, in the first film, you can watch this film, and indeed the other films, you can watch this film and and um, and get a feeling of what the story is and get a sense of who these people are, who these characters are, without necessarily having seen, just having an understanding that they did have these adventures together. Of course, if you've seen the episode, great. And indeed, I could also hazard, well, not hazard, but I could also venture an opinion to say that if you haven't seen the Star Trek TV series yet, Space Seed is a wonderful place to go. Check out Space Seed, and if after you've checked out Space Seed, you've got to go check out City on the Edge of Forever. It is not just it's not just only my favorite Star Trek episode of all time. It's probably the favorite, if not one of the favorites of a lot of Star Trek fans out there. So check out those two episodes if you can. So right. And when I was a kid, I did not watch, as I said, I did not watch Space Seed prior to watching Star Trek 2. I saw Star Trek 2 before I saw Space Seed. And uh, so that I think is a strength of the film, how well it can weave the thread, many threads, and I think respect the people who are fans of the series, while at the same time showing us just indeed how, I think, vast an audience potentially Star Trek has for people who don't even necessarily have a sense of the series and the episodes. So, bravo again for creating this great balance in the terms of the presentation there. Yes, thank you, Christian. Mountains out of molehills. I've always wondered why Scotty would bring Preston's lifeless corpse to the bridge of all places. Oh yes, that's a very interesting scene. Yes, and of course, right. I can probably imagine a few things. Well, first of all, Peter Preston is still alive, right, in that particular moment, because later, just the next cut is into the sick bay, and we see Peter Preston on one of the beds there with that I guess I don't know what it is. It's like a toy lightsaber or a flashlight, right? And so, is the word given? Yes. Or what's the word? Right. And I messed up the lines again. I always mess up the lines. Yes. The word is given. Warp speed. Ah, and that's where you get the bloodied up uniform of Kirk, which is still there. Although I think right. Anyway, so that's that part. Yes, I understand that sequence. Though it doesn't make sense. It would make more sense for Scotty to go to the sick bay. A couple things. Maybe it was he pressed up the wrong button in panic, or not button, where he said, he I guess you don't press buttons there, you always mention where you want to go. So it's maybe he's meant to say uh, he meant to say sick bay, but it just sounded like bridge. He's so panicked, like he's, oh, sick bay. If you're panicked after all this traumatizing action that's been happening, maybe it just didn't come out in a way that the computer could understand. And so maybe the computer thought he said bridge when he meant to say sick bay. So that's one possibility. And then also, it's not just Scotty, of course, but people are just standing around. It's just like it opens, like everyone's like, oh, and then we see a shot of Kirk just standing there, and then Spock's just. So if I were there, I'd be just don't stand there, just hurry up, let's go to the sick bay. I understand it's for dramatic effect. I get that, and also this whole thing about the bridge. It's also for dramatic effect. Yeah, Peter Preston. Yes. Again, much like Sonak, it would be great if there was a Star Trek story that had Peter Preston and Sonak on the same crew. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened. Maybe they could have had adventures. Who would have been the science officer? Maybe Cybok could have been the science officer. Anyway, so they could have gone off on adventures and doing their thing, and maybe it could have been the adventures of the I don't know, the USS Grissom. That we see in part. Oh gosh, maybe not. Maybe anyway, we'll talk about the Grissom and 3 later. But anyway, so yes, Peter Preston fans. Anyone who's a Peter Preston fan, again, my heart goes out to you, Peter Preston. What a character. And again, that's a great praise for the director's cut too. You get a little bit more of the Peter Preston backstory and also the Peter Preston character. And so he has a lot of nerve, does he not? So yes. So let us go now just to the opening here and see how this film opens. So we have the great theme, the original Star Trek theme that opens with the starfield. It's a nice swirling starfield, and then we get this new theme, the James Horner music. It's so we have the introduction of a new theme here. So it's not the Jerry Goldsmith iconic theme, but it's another iconic theme. This is to me, this is a priceless stuff. This is the stuff of legend, and the work of James Horner, I think, speaks for itself. And I think one of the great shining examples of that work, which speaks for itself, is the score for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It is just epic. This is epic, and so. And it's dramatic, it's sweeping, and it's got that great. So it's great. It's just this is the wonderful opening sense and giving us a sign of things to come, not taking away anything from the great Jerry Goldsmith score from before. I mentioned it in the earlier discussion. I love that score to bits. There's a great moment. I think one of my favorite soundtrack moments ever is the Klingon battle at the beginning of the motion picture. That still remains. I think I can say I was listening to that, by the way, between the last Sunday and today. I listened to that Klingon battle music again, I think 3 or 4 times on different occasions. So that's how much I love that. So, but um, uh, yes, but here we have another brilliant musical landscape. And so this is a great sign of things to come. And then we have this, although I must say too, that I love Star Trek 2. I love it so much. I'm not the biggest fan of the font that's used here in the blue lettering. And so I'm familiar only with the versions of the prints that have this blue lettering and this kind of maybe dated. I think this makes the film. Of all the things that date this film, I think the use of this font is perhaps the most dated aspect of it. To be perfectly honest, but it's a very minor point. It's an interesting font. I don't know what the name of the font is. I know fonts have names, but if anyone knows the name of this font, please let me know. Incidentally, the font that's used, I don't know what that font is. This font. This is the font that was used in the titles, of course, for Star Trek, the motion picture, and then for other films. But anyone who knows this font, please let me know. This is a great font. That S, when I was a kid, and I'd always try to trace the font and the way that they'd write Star. I could never do it right. It's just something about the way that it's stretched out. It's so perfect. But yes, so that's the opening, and then we got the great reveal of the crew members on what seems to be a USS starship, a ship, and they are in some kind of situation. And who do we see at the center here? We see Spock. Uh, we see Spock. We see Dr. McCoy. We see Uhura. We see Sulu, and we see some other crew members. And among those other crew members, we see Savick. And so this is the introduction of the character of Savick, as played by Kirstie Alley, one of the key parts, not just of this film, but indeed, arguably, of the Star Trek universe, at least during this sequence of the Star Trek history. And so here we have her at the command, and they are dealing apparently with some kind of crisis situation involving what we hear over the speakers to be a ship called the Kobayashi Maru. And so this, or as the voice on the comm says, this is the Kobayashi Maru. So there is some kind of situation involving a ship and its crew, and some kind of life-threatening situation of a ship that is inside what is known as, or what's referred to as, the neutral zone. And so the idea being they can try to launch a rescue mission, but if they enter the neutral zone, then they are at risk of, well, not just risk, they would be in violation of some kind of intergalactic treaty that is in place in order to maintain a sense of peace and security across the galaxy, including, among other things, some kind of peace between what we understand to be the Federation side and also the Klingon side. We will get to these rather interesting and intricate political connections, perhaps, when we talk about, say, Star Trek 6, and indeed, actually, also Star Trek 5, or Star Trek 4, and Star Trek 3, actually. But we get a sense of it here, and so we also get the phrase of Savick. She seems to be not panic, but she does mention something. She seems to be maybe right, she has the pointed ears as well, so there is that aspect of that character. And then we have later the what do you call it, why am I forgetting here, why am I forgetting here, gosh, I just blanked on this. Yes, I just blanked on. Sorry. It's not explained in the film, and nothing is referred to. What is suggested is that she is a Vulcan, and she also speaks the language with Spock at one very interesting and I'd say quite humorous part of the film early on. There has been some stories. Whether they're canon or not is another question, but there have been these stories that have been written and made about, and suggesting that maybe she has Romulan heritage. Maybe she's half Romulan, half Vulcan, or the like, which would explain why she has a kind of, oh damn, moment on the comm during this, or the con, excuse me, during this particular Kobayashi Maru episode. In other words, the concept being that Vulcans don't show emotion. And so the fact that she is making this exclamation might be suggestive of the fact that maybe she's either not necessarily adhering strongly to this Vulcan code of non-emotion showing, or maybe she is not fully Vulcan. So that has been the kind of, but it's not, at least I don't think so. It's never been fully addressed in the film itself. So we don't get any of that, but it's a part of the interesting lore and background and fascination with the character of Savick that has grown, has just continued to be there over the years. So in any case, we have an interesting character of Savick, and then this ship going into what we understand is the neutral zone, and then we have the appearance of Klingon battle cruisers, which again look very, very curiously much like the Klingon battle cruisers that we saw in the motion picture, but I digress. And then we have the attack on the ship, and everything is exploding, blah, exploding. I think one of the worst explosions, I think of all the explosions, I think Uhura gets the worst one, because it's just, she's sitting there and just like, ah, that's the most intense one in my view. But they all fall one at a time, and Spock gets another explosion too. No power to the weapons, Captain. Blah, and he gets it in the back apparently, and he just falls, and he just has the shot of his head going like that. So, and then all hands abandon ship. Repeat, all hands abandon ship, and then the whole thing opens, and it's a screen. It's this white light, and prayer. Just have it to Klingon. Don't take prisoners. Lights. Like that. Yeah, something like that. So, yes, so here's the introduction of Admiral Kirk. And we have all the people standing up. And then the idea being that this is a test. This has been a test that we have been witness to. And this becomes what is known as the Kobayashi Maru situation or scenario or test. It is the so-called no-win scenario. The idea here is that they are cadets and they are on a training kind of they are in training, and one of the training issues is how these young cadets who are training for leadership, and I'm assuming Savick is one of them, how they will face a no-win situation, how they will face a situation where it is inviting nothing but death. Any choice that they make will be a poor one, and how they will face that particular situation is revealed here early on. That Admiral Kirk, or at least he mentions how it's a test of character rather than trying to solve a particular problem. But we will also see later just how Kirk, in his early days, himself handled the Kobayashi Maru after, of course, many attempts, or a number of attempts, not many, a number of attempts that he himself tried before stumbling upon what he feels to be the best solution for him, and we'll get to that later when we talk about the regular cave sequence. But the other thing too I wanted to say here is that we also see the death of the characters, including the death of Spock. And it's also being emphasized here later when Kirk says, "Aren't you dead?" And Spock says, "Well, we will, of course, see this a little bit later," but it's referred to a little bit in some of the making of documentaries and the like about how during the making of the film, it had been leaked to the public about how the story was, or the people, the producers were planning on killing off Spock. And so there was a kind of heated campaign against the makers of the film, from a lot of fans of Star Trek, who, of course, when they heard this news before watching the film, were livid. So, and it's an interesting backstory as to what exactly, who might have leaked this particular bit of information. And so I encourage you to watch some of the making documentaries if you can. But here we have what essentially is explained by the producers and others to be maybe a subtle way to address that, and to see, for people who are fans of the film and who knew of this news in 1982 when they saw the film in the theaters, and they were of the expectation, oh, is this where Spock's going to die? So it's an interesting reversal in a way, because here are the filmmakers saying, okay, we know that this news has been leaked, so let us now make a sequence at the beginning of the film where Spock dies. And we're just going to emphasize that point by Kirk mentioning that in the opening moment. Brilliant. And so I think it's in one of the newer making of documentary, I think it's Scott Mance, who mentions that he went to the film, he saw it as a kid, and when he saw it as a kid, he knew, he had heard that maybe Spock's going to die. But then he went and saw the film in the theater, and he said he saw the Kobayashi Maru sequence at the beginning and said, "Oh, Spock's dead, but he's not dead." And so that's what they meant. Oh, so he was now able to relax, enjoy the rest of the film. Well, of course we know a couple hours later what happens, and he mentions that as well. But that was a great anecdote from him, because it really showed me, again, I didn't see the film when I was a kid, so I wasn't able to have direct firsthand experience, but that this was really part of the atmosphere for fans of the film who knew what was going to happen. And so to sort of throw them off their game. The filmmakers essentially said, "Yes, he's going to die," and he dies, and that was it. And that's what it must have been. That's what those rumors must have been. So now we can go on with the rest of the story. But of course, later, boom, we get the final reveal of what happened. So it's brilliant, brilliant, three-dimensional chess that's going on there, and the Kobayashi Maru aspect is very key. And we hear it mentioned many times later, not just in this film, but in fact later in the Star Trek universe. Note the uniforms as well. There's a uniform change. They are not so form-fitting that we saw in the prior film. And so we have this very like nautical or military aspect that is introduced, as well as the use of reds and blacks and golds. So this is also, I think, a number of people see this as an improvement, and perhaps that is also shown maybe objectively through objective evidence by the fact that this kind of uniform motif has more or less stuck with the Star Trek universe going forward. So this is also a very key aspect here. And two, we have the relationships that are established in this very outset. We have the relationships with the crew at the very end. We have a little bit about the idea of the Enterprise and a new crew. It's an interesting development. So it begs the question, how much time has passed between the Star Trek, the motion picture, and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan? Because Star Trek, the motion picture, he was Admiral Kirk then. He's Admiral Kirk now. He had his command then, but we understand that he went back to his Admiral command, not uh, not leading any starship in the interim. That's the assumption, and so that has made him feel old. And we get a little hint of this, and he makes a little off-chance remark, and then says, "Now, what is that supposed to mean?" And it cuts, right? And then we also get the warmth between Spock and Kirk, and the idea that Kirk has his birthday, and Kirk has a fondness for antiques, and also Kirk is he is also the antique here is Dickens, and so that's a wonderful thing, and it will return in an interesting form. It'll return later, Dickens. So A Tale of Two Cities, right? And then we have this warmth bond between Kirk and Spock, which is one of the key aspects of Star Trek. That scene in after the Kobayashi Maru test in there, whatever that place is, and the guy in the background doing the vacuum cleaning, I think, and those plants, that wonderful whoever is that interior decorator of that, let's give that person those plants is amazing, and so there's a kind of warmth, there's a type of distance, and that distance, I think, is felt by the fact that Kirk is himself feeling old. And so this is a really beautiful moment, which is augmented to and really wonderfully counterbalanced by the scene that follows immediately, which is in the apartment, Captain of Admiral Kirk. And so here we get this great apartment looking with the San Francisco and Romulan ale. We get Romulan ale, and the idea of Kirk and his eyesight and the glasses. Those will couple up later, as some of you know, when we talk about other films in the series, and that great bond between Kirk and Bones. McCoy, and he says, I'm your doctor and I'm your friend. Get back your command. Get back your command before you become part of this collection, before you really do grow old. That was a really powerful, powerful delivery by DeForest Kelley of that particular moment. And you see also the struggle of Kirk in that moment. He's just sitting there on those, I guess, settee or lounge chairs, and so just in front of the fireplace, and just wondering, drinking the Romulan ale, just wondering about how much time he has left. This is the stuff of Star Trek. The characters are here, but they are feeling their age, especially Kirk. He's feeling his age. Now, this is all in the scope of however many minutes these first couple sequences are. It is amazing. It is amazing how much stuff is packed in here. And then we are off and running, and we get the introduction of the Reliant and Terrell and Chekhov, and of course Khan. But before we get to that, let me now go to the live chat. Yes. Okay. Sorry here, I'm just going to scroll up. Oh, Kubrick Lover says, you still remember this movie, Daisuke. I cannot help but be touched. This is a great reference, of course, to the line of dialogue. You still remember, Admiral. I cannot help but be touched. I, of course, remember you. Yes. Oh, that's great. Um, 5 Ways is here. Yes. I assumed he brought Preston to the bridge out of shock. Yes, it was supposed to be a training mission, and truth be told, it is the first time we have ever seen the Enterprise get manhandled in the series. Yes, 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 it is shock. I can totally accept that. Yes. I'm just scrolling down here. Access Mundi is here. Hello. Yes. Eric Pieper says, I wonder if Khan read to his followers while they were maroon. Yes, that great. Mark Sebring is here. Hello. Yes. Um, Scott Johansson says, Contra Terrell, you mean he hasn't told you the tale to amuse your captain? Huh? Yes. Um, Cooper Clever says, Daisuke, I just shared you on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you. You always share, you always spread the word about this and this channel and the live chat, the live stream. So thank you so much. Thank you always. And to others who share about this channel to others, thank you so much for your support. Thank you indeed. Really, thank you. I wouldn't be able to do this without you. I'm so bad when it comes to this. So thank you once again. Okay. Yes, analysis of sci-fi. Yes, talking about the great Preston and his backstory. Yes. Let's see here. Okay, synthetic. Hello. I recall as a kid having blue fruit juice and not being able to refer to it as anything but Romulan ale. Yes, I hope. I wonder if when you were drinking it, if you drank it the same way that Kirk did, right? With the, this is not blue. I apologize, but it's again something like this, right? Happy birthday. Yes, yes. I didn't do that justice. It's a great moment. Let's see. Obi Sanders is here. Hello. Wrath of Khan has the best costume design. These are my all-time favorite Star Trek uniforms. Those sweaters with the huge pockets. Yes, yes. And there's actually a moment where they're doing a little bit of a costume change after they've transported out of the cave back onto the transporter room of the Enterprise. And they're talking about, buy the book, buy the book. Yes. Um, no uncoded messages on an open channel. You lied. I exaggerated. Hours instead of what is it? Hours instead of days. Now we have minutes instead of hours. Yes. And there's a costume change. So you're absolutely right. Those great sweaters. I think they're not quite turtlenecky, but are they? But maybe they are. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know what the length has to be in order to qualify as a turtleneck. But anyway, yes, well said. Well said. I agree. And you also continue. Yes, you say Khan also has the best monologues in all of Star Trek. Uh, Good Hope and Round the Horn Rest. Yes, yes, thank you. Uh, and Round the Norway Maelstrom and Round Perdition's Flames before I give him up. Yes, yes. I'll chase him round the moons of Nebion, around Taurus. What is it? Oh gosh, I messed it up. Maelstrom and Round Perdition's Flames before I give him up. Prepare to alter course. I love how he kept on that and he says prepare to alter course. But anyway, yes, well said. Yes, Moby Dick references abound. Not to mention, of course, Milton, not to mention, of course, Shakespeare, not to mention, of course, others. But well said, my friend, Obie Sanders. Well done. 5 ways his mock turtleneck. Thank you. And Mountains Out of Molehills continues. Love those excursion jackets with the big collar. I do too. I love those collars. It's great. So speaking of which, now let us go to. That's a great Mountains Out of Molehills. Thank you for that, because that helps me to transition to the next bit, which is now we get the introduction of the next important aspects of the film, namely the Reliant. So we have this new design, this starship with it doesn't have what appears to be any kind of separate warp engine facility, I think, which we see as part of what is the body of the ship of the Enterprise that is separate from the saucer section. We have instead the those protrusions, for lack of a better phrase, coming out of or attached to the back part of the saucer section, which is a very interesting design. Again, it could have been the other way around if you've seen some of the making of documentaries, but it had it such that it was approved upside down with those protrusions coming from the bottom. Thus, the rest is, as they say, history. But the Reliant is a great design. Now, I'm not a warp engineer, so I don't quite know how these things work in terms of science or engineering. But I would assume that maybe the Reliant probably doesn't have the same capabilities of warp speed that, say, a ship like the Enterprise has. But in any case, and I'd always thought that. Well, I don't want to go too much into the idea of the designs of the ships, but it's a great design in terms of the look. And then we have the introduction of Terrell, and also the re-emergence of Chekhov. We understand is on this new ship and on the mission trying to find a planet for what is described as the Genesis Project, or Project Genesis, some kind of lifeless planet that they're trying to look for. So go to some kind of desert world, and they believe that they believe it is Ceti Alpha 6, and excuse me, they think that it has no life, which is their mission, to try to find a planetoid thing in space that has no life forms on it. But they find that there is, on one dino scanner, there seems to be some maybe what is it? There seems to be some life forms that are indicated on the scanner, and according to Chekhov, it might be some what is it? Uh, uh, it might be some maybe life form matter caught in the matrix or something like that. And now that I think about it, I always think about I don't know, like, is it Neo and Trinity? It's caught in SETI Alpha 6. I don't know, but in any case, it's not Neo and Trinity. It's or Morpheus. They go down to investigate what this could be. Maybe it's just a one-off, as they say. If it's something that they can transplant. Say it again with me. Something they can transplant. If it's something they can transplant, then that might be a means by which they can succeed in their mission. So it seems like Terrell and Chekhov are really eager to want to be able to confirm whether it's something that they can transplant. And they're confirming this with Dr. Marcus. And so we see now the introduction of Dr. Carol Marcus, and also David as well. And there's this conversation later that we understand later to be mother and son, Dr. Carol Marcus and her son David, who are also scientists on this joint mission of what we understand will be or is the Genesis Project. And also we get a hint of who Surak was and how this is, and also I should say kudos, thank you very much to Zyrother. I didn't thank you for the last live stream, by the way, but you mentioned how the Vulcan shuttle had the name Surak on it, right? So thank you very much for that. So here's Surak, and also we have mentions of perhaps there was a little bit of a relationship between Dr. Carol Marcus and some guy, some Boy Scout named Jim Kirk. And so this was also a very interesting thing later. Note to the curly hair of David. So, but any case, this is now leading to the away team, which is essentially just Terrell and Chekhov. Doesn't quite make sense to me, right? If I were Captain Terrell, I would actually ask someone else to go in my place, but it's Terrell. That's fine. Terrell likes to be part of the action. I can respect that. So he goes down, and they find this sand dune type of planet, and no, nothing to do with the spice melange or anything. It's just sand, sand, and more sand. And so they find the what is these bunkers, and they go in, and we described a little bit. This is the Botany Bay, or as Chekhov says, Botany Bay. Botany Bay. Oh no, gotta get out. Oh, gotta get hurry, hurry! Ah, they try to get out, but too late. They see these. They're surrounded by, you know, like these very scary, mysterious figures, and then they lost contact with the U.S. with the Reliant, and now we have the introduction, the reveal of say it with me. Who is it? It is the reveal of Khan. Now I'm saying that in my best Chekhov impression. I can't do it justice, but he says Khan, and he looks at Trill and says, "I don't know you, but you, I never forget a face, Mister Chekhov." Isn't it? Now, Eric Pieper, I think, in the chat made reference to the fact that this doesn't quite make sense if we remember season one, where was Chekhov, right? So, but maybe this is something we can think. Maybe he was on the crew, just he wasn't part of that particular what was shown on the episode or something like. But in any case, the idea being, yes, this is the return of Khan. And he's explaining here that this is the remains and the survivors of the crew of the Botany Bay. And talk about those survivors, man. There's the key person, the right hand person, uh, Joachim, and so he gets a lot of close-ups here, and he says later, you know, yours is superior. It's a very tender moment between him and Khan at the end. There might be some kind of relationship. I'm not sure what it is. Nothing is ever mentioned, but it is a very close, intimate one. And so they are. Him and others are the surviving members of the crew of the SS Botany Bay, which, according to Khan, was marooned here by Captain Kirk. And as Terrell says, I've never even met Admiral Kirk. Admiral. Never told you how. Admiral Kirk. So Khan is really, really upset, not just by the fact that he was marooned here, but also by the fact that Kirk has advanced and he's now Admiral. Admiral Kirk. Oh, so before we get to, I know Seth was talking about the Botany Bay crew members. Those Botany Bay crew members, that look is just, that is great. It's sand dune meets like Mad Max type of look. It's I've heard it described in those similar terms. They also look like, do you know do you know the musical Cats? They also look like they would be members of the cast for the musical Cats, you know, like that guy Joachim. He could be like, what's it, Rum Tum Tugger, right? That's his name, right? Uh, right, the Rum Tum Tugger is a curious cat. You could imagine him just breaking out into song, you know, and then maybe who would Khan be? I don't know. Khan would be what gosh. When they'd be singing about the cat is so clever, as was his name, magical Mr. Mistopheles. So maybe Khan's Mr. Mistopheles in that scenario. But in any case, they look like they could have also been auditioning for roles in the film, not the film. Well, there's also the film Cats. I actually saw Cats in the theater, but also the musical Cats. So uh, so anyway, but it's not Cats. It's the surviving crew of the Botany Bay, and here we have the Seti eels. Now this brings up an interesting question, which is the Seti eels are, we understand, right? This is Seti. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we get to that too, this is not Seti Alpha. This is not Seti Alpha 6, as Terrell and Chekhov and the crew of the Reliant thought. This is in fact Seti Alpha 5, and it's explained by the fact that Seti Alpha 6 exploded and it shifted the orbit of the planets, and it caused the orbit of what this planet is, Seti Alpha 5, to change to the effect that it turned everything into this barren wasteland. because of the way in which the distance from the whatever the star that it was orbiting changed in that way. That's the implication. So this is very important too, because in the idea is at the end of the space seed, it was decided that the crew of the Botany Bay, including Khan, would be left behind on the planet called Ceti Alpha 5. And according to Chekhov, who reminds us, Ceti Alpha 5, there was life, a chance for, and he gets cut off because, so he thought this was Ceti Alpha 6, but then Khan reminds us that actually this is Ceti Alpha 5. So, and that way he reminds us is wonderful. And he says, "Oh, you lie! At Ceti Alpha 6, there was life." And he just cuts away and says, "This is Ceti Alpha 5!" Right? That is a great line. So he is really, really upset. He just wants to make it absolutely clear that this is Ceti Alpha 5. Don't you ever forget it, people. This is Ceti Alpha 5. This is Ceti Alpha 5. Okay. Now, oh yeah, it also it reminds me too of like a little. I don't know if it's a joke or anything, but it also reminds me: don't ever ask Khan for directions. Don't ever ask Khan for directions. Right? Can you imagine if maybe I'm driving with my wife somewhere, and we're on the highway at night or something, and we're trying to get to this place called Ceti Alpha 5, and we get lost. We had to stop by on the way, this I don't know, this gas station or something on the way on the highway, and we stop at the gas station, and my wife says, we should ask someone for directions, and I say, oh, that's a good idea. So I get out of the car and I go to the gas station. Oh, excuse me, and who's at the get me? Oh, what's your name? And the person at the gas station says, oh, this is this is my name's Khan. He says, oh, oh, hello, Khan. Excuse me. I'm trying to get somewhere. And Khan's looking at me in this really angry way. Where do you want to go? And he said, I say, my wife and I are trying to get to this place called Ceti Alpha 5. Can you help me? He cuts me and says, this is Ceti Alpha 5. So, yeah, so I can imagine what it must be like for someone who wants to ask Khan for directions. Don't ever do it, my friends. Don't ever do it. If you're ever stranded and you stop by at a gas station and Khan is working there, just say thank you and be polite, quietly walk away, and just go to the next gas station and just ask for directions. Believe me, I'm sure you'll be better off. Although it would be an interesting thing not to ask about Ceti Alpha 5, but maybe ask about other things, like what is that game that you guys were playing in the bunkers there, or what's your favorite book? I'd love to ask Khan what is your favorite book. If you had to rank the books, which is your is it Moby Dick? Is it Moby Dick? And if Khan says no, actually it's not Moby Dick, isn't that a great thing? Could you imagine in today's age if you had Khan making a YouTube video about his top 10 books by Khan? Oh gosh, could you imagine all the views it would get? I'm sure it would get a million clicks, maybe more in 24 hours. And so anyway, that's an idea for anyone who is, if you can do a good Khan impression, give us a YouTube video giving us Khan's top 10 favorite books. I, for one, would love to see that. Okay, and so then we have, of course, now going back to the Ceti eels. It's described by Khan as being, these are Ceti Alpha 5's only indigenous life forms. So this is very important. So what was it, therefore, that the scanners on the USS Reliant were picking up? Because the whole point for Terrell and Chekhov to be on the planet and surveying the planet to begin with was to see if there wasn't any life form that was there. Because if there were any life forms, that would make the planet unusable for purposes of Genesis. So this is a kind of thing. Did the scanners pick up the Botany Bay crew, or did they pick up the Ceti eels, or both? Or was it perhaps this scary thing of maybe they didn't even pick up the Ceti eels? Maybe they just picked up the Botany Bay crew members. If that's the case, if the Botany Bay crew members weren't there, the possibility or the implication might be, the possibility of such anyways, that they could have rendered this planet as being a lifeless planet and not have picked up the fact that there are actually indigenous life forms on the planet of the Ceti eels. Now, I'd like to hope that that's not the case, but that could have been a possibility. This also speaks to a very interesting detail that we see later when one of the little eels is seen coming out of the ear of Chekhov. And what does Kirk do? He doesn't save it as a sample to study in terms of new life or anything. He immediately blasts it out with his phaser. And so I know that this has been it's been described as being one of the critical points that Gene Roddenberry might have had towards Star Trek or others who might have thought that this is not something that is within the spirit of Star Trek. If anything, they would have, if it was so-called the spirit of Star Trek, they would have not killed this new life form, but they would have rather saved it and studied it, etc. Again, what could have been, we don't quite know. But in any event, we know that this is definitely not a lifeless planetoid in space, but in fact, it does inhabit life in the form of these eels, and then also in the form of the Botany Bay crew and Khan, and maybe others. Who knows? But now we also see that really scary sequence involving the eels and the just a kind of creepy thing about suits and helmets, and it just like goes there, and you see the little tongue of dun dun, oh, and it just crawls into the uh. So this is pretty intense stuff. I also love the bit where you don't just see the tongue stick out, but you also see the eyes of the little eel, and it looks really scary. But maybe at the end of the day, these eels are just trying to survive. You know, they're just trying to survive. They're not. They weren't. They didn't ask to be taken out of their mother's back there and then thrown into some random guy's helmet. They didn't ask this. They just. I'm sure they just wanted to just not do anything. Just wanted to stay in the comfort of their mom, whatever. But they were just taken out and just thrown. So what else could they do? So these set of eels, poor set of eels. You know, we never got a chance to get to know. Well, I guess we did, and we saw what happened and so like. But in any case, that is the sequence of the set of eels, and then we go to the introduction of the Star Trek. I keep saying this, not the Star Trek Enterprise, the Starship Enterprise, and going from there. But before we go any further, let us now go to the live chat. Yes. Samuel Stevens, hello. You say, I want Khan's top 10 book list. Oh, thank you. Yes, don't you? I'd love to get that. That would be great. Yes. Oh, Bartholomew, yes, hello. You're here again. Yes, it's nice to see you. It worked. Hello, Dice Again, everyone. Hello, it's nice to see you. Yes. Oh, Seth Christian says Seth has oh, interesting. Seth says there are villainous people that live above gas stations or convenience stores. Oh, yes, yes. Uh, Jerome Giselberry says, imagine a literature course taught by Khan. I'd sign up for that, but maybe distance learning to be on the safe side. Yes, that would be very cool. Gosh, that's an interesting thing. Could you imagine? Yes. Khan teaching literature at the academy. Yes. Yes. What would he be teaching? Yes. Again, maybe it would be just like his SETI Alpha 5. That says SETI Alpha 5 or something, that says Moby Dick or something. Yeah. From hell's heart, I stab at thee. Yes. For a hate's sake, I spit my last breath at thee. Fascinating. Okay. All right. Let's see. Seth says William Shatner would have made a good Bond. Oh, interesting. That's an interesting concept. Oh, I never thought about that. Mike says the eels are straight out of a Cronenberg film for sure. An analysis of sci-fi. Khan is the greatest villain in all Star Trek. We'll get to his villainy, those great iconic scenes, yes, momentarily. But in fact, let us now go to that, because now we go back to the ship, the return of the Enterprise. We understand that why am I forgetting what's it? Spock, excuse me, Spock, Captain Spock, right? Now he is in the command of this new crew of now we understand freshly graduated trainees that are now cadets, or they're going to be on this training cruiser mission, an actual mission of sorts, or not actual training cruise, using the Starship Enterprise. But this is a trainee mission, and so we have veteran, seasoned crew members that are part of this as well, including Sulu and Uhura and McCoy and of course Admiral Kirk, who is going to be observing and who is also going to be just judging and evaluating the performance of the crew on this particular mission. And so we have now, for instance, Savick given the opportunity to uh, to uh, to command the ship out of dock, out of space dock. And this is where Spock says, take her out, Mr. Savick. And we also have the introduction before this of the emergence of these seasoned veterans onto the Enterprise, excuse me, that wonderful exchange between Savick and Spock with Vulcan, and then the uh, Peter Preston, Scotty, etc. And then, are you ready to go on a training cruise and give the word, Admiral? And the Admiral says, yes, the word is given. And I love the bit where Bones says to Kirk, what about the rest of the inspection? And you see him going, that's great. For the longest time, too, when I was a kid, I didn't quite know what he was saying. I know he's saying later. He's mouthing, I want to do it later. I never understood what it was until a little bit later. Again, when I first saw this film, I was 4 or 5 years old. So, but again, yeah. It's very cool, very cool. And then da 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 da. Let's reuse the motion picture footage from that part of the film. Da 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 da. And then we have the whole thing going out of space dock and going out. And here's something that I never understood, which is they have no fixed point in terms of the training mission, which is why Spock says to Sulu, or where Admiral Kirk says to Spock, captain's discretion. And then Spock says to Sulu, Mr. Sulu, you may indulge yourself, which is the idea being that Sulu can essentially choose at random where they're going to go for this training voyage mission. Now, that, I think, on the surface sounds okay, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that doesn't quite make sense. If one is going to be piloting or taking a ship, this kind of Federation class, not Federation class, but it's a Federation ship out, you better show, or you better plot, you better plan in advance where you're going to go. You know what I mean? So you can't just go randomly out somewhere. There has to be this, and others, that never sat well with me. And also it never sat well with me because, too, it's also all random. Now, I understand that this is a kind of literary creation. The story is, of course, very much based on literature, and it's dependent on arcs, but there's a whole lot of coincidences that go on in the story of Star Trek to the Wrath of Khan. One of such coincidences is the fact that Sulu can randomly go wherever he wants. If he decided to indulge himself, say, in the opposite direction of the galaxy, say he ended up just going this way, right? He ends up going this way, and this brings him and the ship quite conveniently near the vicinity of Regula and Regula 1, and then indeed the Reliant. And that means that, right, when this whole thing happens with Regula, and it's, again, we're the only ship around, and so we have to address this. That means that they have to go to Regula 1, right? And that's all because, essentially, Sulu decided to go this way. If Sulu had, at this point, said, Spock says, you may indulge yourself, he goes this way, then that means that the whole thing is done. Maybe the film is over. It wouldn't have been the Enterprise that would have taken care of Khan and Regular One. It would have been another ship. Maybe it was the, I don't know, the Constellation, or the Grissom that we'll see maybe in other films, or maybe other ships. Who knows? But in any case, right? That's an interesting coincidence. It's kind of, I don't know if I tend to buy that stuff. But again, it's just part of the fun. You go along with it. And good on Sulu, because, of course, that meant that because of his choice, we were able to get this wonderful grand adventure that is Star Trek to the Wrath of Khan. But, of course, maybe Spock. It's Spock who, in fact, who says, Sulu, who you may indulge yourself. Maybe had Spock been a little bit more proactive in terms of the actual plot point of the fixed location of where they would go, maybe he could have avoided what ended up happening to him at the end of Star Trek 2, which is his death. So maybe it's Spock's fault that he died, because he should have been a little bit more concrete in his orders to Sulu about where they go. In fact, if they had gone the other way, he could have totally avoided his whole death to begin with. He could have still been alive, at least in this form, anyways. But in any case, that brings us to the whole sequence with the interaction between now the Enterprise, which is now off and running, and now the Khan aspect, which is now off and running, with Terrell and Chekhov now in the grips of Khan and in his control, and the cast of the musical Cats as well. And then also in the third component, we have Regula and Genesis. And we have here the idea that Khan might be trying to get the Genesis device. And from here, we get the jamming of transmissions between Regula, between Carol Marcus and Admiral Kirk. And this is, just Jim, did you give the order? Did you give proper authorization? No one's authority. What's going on? I don't understand what's going on. Uhura, help me. And Uhura's like, transmission damned at the source. So this brings us to the crisis of the film, which is we must go to Regula 1 to investigate this particular matter. I love this exchange, by the way, between Carol Marcus and Kirk over this video interface. It's do you and then just you could sense William Shatner's frustration. It's like, my goodness, just it's like, right, if it's like those in the corner, right, the Wi-Fi, right, the bars, it's not quite there yet. It's maybe 1 or 2 bars lower than usual, so that's probably what's going on there. So that brings Kirk to Spock's I guess chambers here, which is very interesting here too, which we got that great, like, I don't know, gold lattice thing in the background, and a wonderful James Horner music, which is the Spock theme, na 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 na, and we have the beautiful relationship between Kirk and Spock, and Kirk is trying to be very. He's not doing this in the Decker way. Maybe he learned his lesson in his interactions with Decker back in the first film, and now he's trying to be very gentle about. He really should take command, but he doesn't want to essentially take it away from not just the captain of the Enterprise, but also his friend. And so he's trying to be very soft about it. He says, it could be nothing, or I should say in that wonderful Kirk way, it could be nothing. And Spock said, Jim, operate on a false presumption, right? I am a Vulcan. I have no ego to bruise. Yes. And so the idea here is that, and the idea too, which is emerging, is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Right, so, and that is a very, very important theme and an important phrase throughout this film, and indeed throughout the whole Star Trek mythology, storyline, storyverse, universe. And so it's all here in this beautiful, beautiful moment. And Spock is doing his Spock thing. Kirk is doing his Kirk thing. They're essentially working on different planes of understanding, and yet they're connecting. So it's so lovely. And the friendship and bond between these two is just, it's touching. It is very, very touching indeed. And Spock just knows exactly, this is what we have to do. Of course, you take command. And he does. And he does. He takes command so well. And with that, they now are off to investigate this issue in terms of Regula and what's going on. So that is and now before we get to the confrontation between the Enterprise and the Reliant, there's also this introduction of what the Genesis project is. What is Genesis? And this brings the triumvirate, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, into the room where they give a type of top secret briefing as to what Genesis is. Now, Genesis is this scientific project that is headed by Dr. Carol Marcus, and David is part of her scientific team, we understand. And this is the idea of some kind of device which is equipped with some sort of propelling matter or something that, when ejected and when injected into a particular uh, lifeless matter, like a rock or something, it will then, according to the explanation, again, I apologize for messing this up, it will then reorganize. It will do molecular reorganization on the quote unquote subatomic level to create life generating matter of equal mass. I hope I got that right. So that is the whole crux of what Genesis is somehow the introduction of some kind of scientific cathartic event, or not cathartic event, but it's some kind of scientific event that will then turn something that is lifeless into something that is filled with life, right? So the idea here is that a planet or some kind of lifeless form, like a moon or other dead form, according to Carol Marcus, can be subjected to the Genesis device, and then instantaneously, what's known as the Genesis effect, the lifeless moon turns into this planet that can sustain life. Fascinating, according to Spock, and also filled with a lot of very precarious moral implications that McCoy also alludes to. And we have that great exchange between the two of them, which is hinting at the humanity behind McCoy and also the almost scientific precision of Spock. Although at the same time, I think they're both coming from the same place, and I think Spock does acknowledge that there is a type of moral ambiguity, a morass, if you will, with regard to the improper application of the Genesis device, as we've seen it described here by Dr. Carol Marcus. So there's a lot going on here. And the idea how it's divided into stage 1, 2, and 3. Stage 1 is in a laboratory, stage 2 is in underground, and stage 3 might be on a large-scale planet source. And then we understand later that this is the reason why the Reliant was on the lookout for some kind of lifeless planetoid place, like what they thought Ceti Alpha 6 was going to be, in order to be the subject test location for phase 3 of the Genesis project. So it's all coming together. Now, this is another, it's not a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin, it's not, this is a really key aspect of the films in this particular sequence, 2, and in fact, 3 and 4. And it's also linking to this idea of turning something that is dead and then bringing it back to life. Resurrection, death, life. When we talked earlier about the idea of Kirk feeling old, there's the idea of old age and transformation to feeling young. Genesis is very much part of that. It is key to that. It is linked to that very precisely. And this is one of the great strengths of Nicholas Meyer, and the fact that he has this what can be described as a type of literary mind when it comes to linking these together. This type of introduction of a theme is very literary. Now, as with many types of literary based or literarily constructed stories, these sorts of stories also operate on what can be described as a series of coincidences that need to operate all at the same time in order for the story to work. Now, I mentioned earlier one of such coincidences, I think, being the fact that Sulu is able to randomly go to this particular vicinity. So that's one coincidence. Another coincidence is the fact that we have Khan being able to take over the Reliant, which was crewed by a crew, one of whose members is a former crew member of the crew of Kirk, and the Reliant also being subject to the information of the Genesis Project, which is headed by Dr. Carol Marcus, who we will understand later to be a person who had an intimate romantic relationship with Kirk all those years ago. And the fact that the Enterprise is within the same vicinity of not just Regula, but also the Reliant, and also the fact that Kirk and Khan have this. So all these coincidences are happening. So it's very literary in terms of what's going on here. And I think it doesn't call attention to itself too much during the course of the film, but it does, when one sits back and thinks about it, oh yeah, there are a lot of coincidences that are happening here. But again, it's all part of the fun of the film, the suspension of disbelief. Another of those coincidences, or maybe it's not even coincidence, another thing that I always fail to realize, and again, for those who are scientists, please let me know where my thinking is inappropriate. But the Genesis project never made sense to me for one key detail, which is if you have a planet in space, like Earth, for example, one of the reasons why Earth is able to have been developed the way it was developed in terms of life forms over the expanse of years, right? Over time, stretched out into the infinite. The reason why it's the case is because it is in a certain proximity with a source of energy, which is, according to Lex Luthor in Superman for the Quest for Peace, it's essentially one big nuclear reactor in space, which is the sun. The sun and the Earth have a certain distance, such that based on this distance and based on the amount of energy emitted from the sun, in accordance with this distance, life was able to grow and develop over time on this planet called Earth. So this suggests to me that not only do we need a type of, say, molecular structure on the planet that can develop in a way that sustains life, but we also need an energy source, an external energy source that will also provide energy for life to be able to continue to be sustainable. It's not just the planet. In other words, there also has to be a sun or a star or something nearby. In on Earth, we call it, for example, the plants use the sun or the power of the sun to absorb that power and to transform that energy into something that is used to sustain life under a process called photosynthesis, right? So this is an example of how the sun's energy is used here. Well, it's the same thing too, I think, for any other planet in the world of Star Trek. Now, the Genesis project doesn't figure in, I think, any type of calculation as to not just a lifeless planetoid, but also its proximity to a nearby source of energy like the sun or another star. It doesn't do that. In fact, when we get to the Genesis cave in the inside of Regula, there is a shot where you see the like sun coming out of the cave. That never made sense to me. Does that mean therefore that the Genesis device? I mean, Carol Marcus in her explanation says it creates life generating matter. So that might assume that maybe the Genesis device creates something that also is a type of energy reactor that will itself be a source of energy. That could be the case, in which case you have a confined source of energy that explains why you have some sunlight coming out when in the cave, which is essentially underground. It doesn't make sense to have a sunlight that's underground unless maybe the Genesis device was able to create that source of energy itself. That could be the case. If that's the case, though, that at the end of the film, when you have the planet forming after the explosion of the Reliant, uh, it where is the nearby sun, right? There's nothing. The Genesis device didn't apparently create a star or sun, at least as far as I can tell. Maybe it did. It just did it off screen. Who knows? But so you see what I'm saying? So it doesn't. That part doesn't make sense to me. Incidentally, too, right? The whole thing with the Mutara Nebula at the end and the attack between the Enterprise and the Reliant, and the Genesis device is already on the Reliant at the time. This is all happening within the proximity of Regula, right? Which is described also by Spock in the middle of the film as being like just essentially like a dead rock in space. And then Kirk says, well, Reliant could be behind that rock. A distinct possibility, right? So it's essentially a dead rock in space. So am I led to believe that, right, the Reliant was going all over the place trying to find a potential candidate for phase 3 of the Genesis project, where in fact the perfect candidate for phase 3 was actually right there in terms of the Regular One station, which is Regular right there. They used it for the cave, but they could have used it for the planet. Who knows? Again, these details aren't clear to me. Also, I should point out too, if I'm indeed correct that the Genesis planet is indeed based on Regula, then what happened to the stuff that was inside the cave? Because it's inside, right? I hope maybe the Genesis effect affected only the surface of the planet, not inside. If that's the case, then thank goodness, because I think also there are some life forms inside there. If the Genesis effect, if this was indeed Regula, and the Genesis effect permeated, not just affected the surface, but also permeated the surface going inside underground, then those life forms would have been killed as well. So I can't. Anyway, if I'm wrong about that, if it's not a planet, if it's not Regula, please let me know. But I think it's Regula that it turns into at the end there. But yeah. what was I saying? Yeah. So what was I saying? Okay. So I'll go back to the chat momentarily here, but this is just speaking to the point where there are, I think, a number of coincidences, and I think it's just a suspension of disbelief. But in the context of the film, it works. It totally works. And perhaps this is it's might be explained away by saying the main point of the film is not the Genesis stuff. It's the Kirk, Spock, Khan stuff, and indeed that's the case. However, it is still very important because we see it traveling through quite significantly, not just through this film, but also in the context of at least the next two films. So, um, yes. Okay, so let's see. W4 says it was the Mutara Nebula that formed the Genesis planet. Okay, how does that? Thank you very much for that. Although I don't quite know, I still don't know how that works. Because the nebula is like this gaseous cloud stuff, right? And the gaseous clouds don't I don't how they don't form planets, right? The planetoid was already there, right? So you needed because the whole point of Genesis was that it took something that was already pre-existing matter and just transformed that pre-existing matter into something that was life generating of equal mass. So there has to be something of equal mass, like something that has this weight is still there with the same amount of mass at the end of the Genesis effect. So the Mutara Nebula, how that turned into the Genesis planet. I mean, if that's the case, that's great. It's just I'm not sure if it's fully explained, but oh well, oh well. Again, that's not the um, the point of this, I suppose. The whole point is the drama between the characters, right? Um, yes, yes, yes. Scott makes a reference to yes, the goo. Yes, we were goo, according to Q. Yes, according to Q, making reference to Next Generation. Yes, and Zyrother says, "I thought the Genesis explosion just created a planet out of nothing, but maybe it was right." Is that the case? Did it just create it out of nothing? Because because the explanation of Dr. Carol Marcus, the proposal to the Federation was it was a great CG sequence. Right? It's classic, which is the idea of the torpedo being shot into the moon or other dead planet, and it's shot, and it's a whole thing about the bubbling of the and then the whole thing turns into the planet. So that's what I thought. And so, in any case, yeah. What W Forge? Thank you. Nebula is still matter, and the nebula is huge. Just my thoughts. Okay, that's certainly a possibility, definitely. So, uh, 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 but again, it 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 wasn't shown, I suppose, in the video itself that Carol Marcus prepared. It was a moon, and it was the whole point of the Reliant looking for a planet. If they could find a gaseous cloud, that could have been, I mean, that would have saved the whole trouble of having to go to a place like SETI Alpha 6 to begin with. But in any case, not to belabor the point any further, that is it's still a very key topic. And thank you very much to W Forge and others who are engaging me with this conversation. Yes, but again, it's the whole point is the planet. They are looking for a planet, so it looks like a planet is needed for Phase 3 anyway. Now, if it means that they could create a whole planet out of nothing, that is still, I think, something to be celebrated. And if that's truly the case, there's still the question, of course, is where the source of energy is, if it can be created out of nothing. Because after all, if we remember, the whole point of SETI Alpha 5 and SETI Alpha 6 being exploded and the shock shifting the orbit of SETI Alpha 5, the whole thing about the orbit shifting is premised upon the fact that a planet's distance to, say, a central, the centrifugal source of energy, the star, the whole change of orbit means the distance is changed. Therefore, any change in distance can have drastic effects on the planet life. And we understand this is what happened to Ceti Alpha 5, which was prior to the destruction of Ceti Alpha 6, a planet that could have been life sustainable, but it wasn't. So it's not just the planet itself, but it also is a yes. But anyway, let us now go to the next phase, because time is limited here, which is the confrontation. So this is the confrontation between Kirk and Khan, or between the Enterprise and the Reliant. And we have two ships, or it's Khan very cleverly using the Reliant as essentially center. It's a subterfuge. This is the smokescreen. This is the way to get close to the Enterprise, because these are two Federation ships. There's no reason for a Federation ship to have shields up against another Federation ship, although Savick very, very wisely points out, when communications have not reached you, mentions the regulations about how there should be defensive postures taken. Even it doesn't matter what the ship is, if no line of communication has been established. Although she's cut off in mid-sentence by Spock, who is trying to remind her that Kirk is well aware of the regulations. Although at the end, Kirk applauds her for saying, you should keep on quoting regulations, of course, because he thinks that he should have done this, but he didn't. This was one of his failures, he acknowledges, not putting the shields up in time, trusting too much in what appears to be the situation before him, namely just a stranded Federation ship whose communication lines have been damaged through some kind of overload of their coils. Their coil systems are normal, though, according to Spock. That brings the line up to the side and allows Khan to target, lock phasers on target, locking phasers on target. They're locking phasers, rage fire, and they fires on the side there, and we see the destruction, that trail of black, and then inside, the implication being that the engineering room, the warp engine systems are being destroyed in like out of the blue, out of nowhere, and people are being injured, they're being killed without shield. So this is even more of an intense situation. And then so this is and then not just that, it's coming around and it's firing a torpedo as well, and it seems to light the parts of the bridge on fire, etc., again without shields, and cutting off power. This is a huge blow to the USS Enterprise. It's completely unexpected, totally blindsided, not knowing what's going on. And then in the midst of this chaos and anarchy, we get the idea that the commander of the Reliant is asking for a surrender. Dun-dun-dun-dun. And I love Sulu's look. He looks so sad in that particular moment. And then Kirk's on screen, do it. We still have time. And on screen, I'm dead, and the reveal. Dun, boom. God, you still remember, Admiral. I cannot help but be touched. I, of course, remember you. What is the meaning of this attack? Where's the crew of the ride? Surely I've made my intentions plain. I mean to deprive your ship. Okay, but anyway, so there we have the confrontation after all these years within different spaces, again, because they weren't in the same room, which is amazing to think about. Khan and Kirk together again. And this starts the whole ball rolling in terms of Khan just relishing in the moment. Kirk, as he says, caught with his britches down. And the whole place is smoky, red, hellish. It's a no-win scenario. This is the Kobayashi Maru scenario being played out in real time in a certain point of view. But as we see, this is an instance where, again, much like the Kobayashi Maru scenario that we will learn how Kirk handled back in his cadet days, or his trainee days, here he handles it with such grace. So all of a sudden, we have this idea of the prefix code. And what is the prefix code? So this is some kind of code that a ship can use if they have the code of the other ship, then they can enter that code into their own console and then use their console to order that ship to do something like lower their shields. So this is an interesting concept. I don't know if this concept has ever been introduced in Star Trek up to this point. but we have the whole idea of the prefix code. So okay, I mean, it's introduced, I think, in an interesting way, such that, oh, this is something that, like, you'd know if you were a veteran, seasoned officer, right? Because Savick says, I don't understand, and right, and this is a great opportunity for people. Each ship has its own combination, right? In order to prevent a ship from doing it, what is it we're doing, right? So this is if you enter the code, therefore, if they know the Reliant code, which is 16309, and you entered it in, then you can order, you can use the console to lower the shields of the Reliant, which is what they do. And a brilliant maneuver during the space of, say, 60 seconds. And I love the bit, too, where before they hit on the prefix code, Kirk is there, like, Spock says, well, at least he knows he doesn't have Genesis. At least we know he doesn't have Genesis. And Kirk's like, keep nodding as though he gave me orders. Just trying to think because he's just panicking. This is such a great Kirk moment. Of course, it was Kirk who had, essentially, it was Kirk's fault that this whole thing is happening. But, that's just part of the movie business. That's, or not movie, but that's part of the charm of this film, getting into the trouble and then trying to get out of it. Oh, gosh, does Kirk get out of Kirk and company, how they get out of it in style. And my goodness, not without its casualties, of course, that we see with the poor Peter Preston and others. But still, they get out of it in such a Kirk way. He says, right, here it comes. Now, and I love that great 16309, and Joaquin says, "Sir, our shields are dropping." And it's like, "Well, raise them." And it's like, "I can't." And it's like, "Oh, where's the override? The override, right?" And fire, 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 we can't fire. So why can't you? They've damaged the photon control and the warp drive. We must withdraw. No, we must. Did it? And then I can't do it. Here's the Enterprise and here's the Reliant. And, did it? Yeah. She can. Enterprise can wait. She's not going anywhere. Dun, 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 dun. And then Sulu says, "Sir, you did." I did nothing. What a great sequence. So that's round one. That's round one. So round one, we can say, is not a draw. It's probably Khan winning. It's not a full knockout, but it's pretty bad. And so that's round one. Of course, then we get to the Regula sequence, and they go in and they travel to Regula. I have to. Sorry, I'm running low on time here, so I'll rush it along. But I apologize. And they go and they investigate Regula. And they find the place deserted, except for all these dead bodies, which is and a little mouse and dead bodies. So and the coat, of course, and then it's a pretty gross, bloody affair. But they find Terrell and Chekhov in these boxes. Oh God! And then the idea is that they explain, oh, it was Khan. He put creatures in our bodies to control our minds, but we're okay now. You can trust us. Yeah, I love that bit where he's talking and suddenly Chekhov's just looking out like, so yeah, okay, we can trust you. Okay, Chekhov, I trust you. Now, where did you say they went? Oh, okay, I don't know. Let's do this. And then there's this whole thing about going by the book. They go into Regula inside what they understand to be probably inside the body of the planet itself, the planetoid itself. And then they have a further confrontation with a lot of things going on. Here we have the surviving members of the Regula scientific team attacking or defending themselves, including David. David and Kirk fighting, father and son essentially fighting. They don't know they're father and son except when we have Carol Marcus, Jim! And this is, we understand too, maybe the first time in years, perhaps, that Jim and Carol are meeting together for the first. I mean, they've talked over, I guess, kind of jammed transmission of their communications, but this is probably the first time they've met in years, perhaps. I don't know. And David doesn't appear to know who Kirk is, but just with that look, we know that Kirk is David's son, and Carol and Kurt and Jim had a relationship. Wow. And it's all said within the space of seconds. This is brilliant stuff. Because there's never any word spoken. oh, is that David? That's all he says, right? That's all. And you can see too the look that Carol has, and the look, uh, right, between these two characters. That speaks volumes. Now this is so beautiful to me. You know, it reminds me. I'm going to skip ahead here. It reminds me too of the end sequence, the funeral sequence of Spock, and the whole thing of um, the torpedo slash coffin that's going, and the Scotty bagpipes, and everyone's standing at attention, and even David, he's distraught with emotion, and he looks towards us, but he kind of looks also towards the coffin as it's going by him. But all the while, Carol is always looking, not towards the coffin, but always looking this direction, and we assume that she's looking at Kirk, at Jim Kirk. This is that look between the two of them is it's amazing. This is amazing. The acting prowess here is intense, and as I say, their looks have to tell us all the years of the relationship that occurred between them. Not to mention also the fact that it has to also transmit to us the fact that David is Kirk's son, and you get that in that line how William Shatner delivers it. He says, "Is that David?" What can I say? This is the stuff. This is the stuff of Star Trek that does it for me. It's this type of moment, and of course, then we get the idea too that David doesn't know that Kirk is his father, but we will get that scene a little bit later in the film. But rather than be able to take a breath here. Oh no, the filmmakers here are giving us a full-bodied entertainment, and at the same time, so well balanced. We go right into the betrayal of Terrell and Chekhov. And I love the Chekhov voice here. It's like he's something's caught in his throat. He doesn't say, he says, his line is, "I'm sorry, Admiral," but he says it like, "I'm sorry, Admiral." "Your Excellency, have you been listening?" "I have indeed. You have done well. I knew it. You should have." Blah. So one of the Genesis scientists is gone, bitten the dust, unfortunately, or bitten the phaser dust. And so a lot of pushing around to Savick pushing David around. So that's another indication of perhaps there might be a relationship that's blossoming between them. If Savick is pushing you around, that might be signs of her interest. But in any case, now we have this confrontation, this tense confrontation, right? Terrell says, "Kill Admiral Kirk. It is difficult. I try to obey, but kill him. Kill him, Terrell. Now." And then suddenly there's this outline which looks very much, and then he's gone. And then Chekhov, and then what's that? Khan, you bloodsucker. So all this stuff is happening. It's all intense stuff. It's all packed here, and it's presented and handled so beautifully and so effectively, so tense filled. And we have yet another great exchange between the two men, these two titans. And so the great line here, and I mentioned it earlier, "I shall leave you as you left me, as you left her, marooned for all eternity at the center of a dead planet, buried alive, buried alive." And so what's Kirk's response? All of you, please say it with me. "Khan!" Right? "Khan! Khan!" And then, of course, we get that great shot outside of the planet. So we get the sense that Kirk's voice travels through planets. It's Khan! And then we have Khan's like, this is great. So I can't do it justice, but this is the great thing. So this brings me to a great point of this film, which is the Khan calls. What are your favorite moments of the film where someone is mentioning Khan? So there's this moment, which is probably number one, Kirk saying Khan. But there's also a great moment at the beginning in the Botany Bay, SETI Alpha 5, where Chekhov, after the reveal of Khan, Chekhov says, "Khan." So that's also good. And that's probably in the top 3. I don't know, maybe. So that's a good one. There's also McCoy, who says, when they're talking about, right, when they're in the regular one space station, and Kirk's saying, you know, talking about phase 2, she said it was going to be underground. It was going to be underground. It was going to be underground. And talking about the transporter and the coordinates. And he says, right, Khan could be down there. That's McCoy. Khan could be down. He's been there. So Khan. So that's McCoy saying Khan. And I love Dr. Carol Marcus. Who is Khan? So that's another great one. And then also there's some other ones by Kirk later. Khan, I'm laughing at your superior intellect and all that stuff. There are a lot of great Khan shout outs. Also, incidentally, too, it's a different spelling, I know, but there's also Mr. Savick, you have the Khan. Right, so Khan is spelled Conn, and I think that's like a nautical term, which is meant to be you have the command of the vessel. So you have the Khan. So that's another Khan call out. So I'd love to think that maybe that's Spock, or that's Kirk saying to Mr. Savick, you have the Khan, when then the three of them go to talk about Genesis. I would have loved it if Kirk said to Mr. Savick, instead of saying, Mr. Savick, you have the Khan, if he said, Mr. Savick, you have the Khan! And then they just brought up, it was like, huh? What's going on? Huh? And then he said, foreshadowing. Okay. So anyway, so we have the great Khan call out here. Again, it's been done so many times. I don't claim to be the best when it comes to the Khan stuff, but it's been done a lot. Family Guy, I think, is one of my favorite Khan homages, as it were. Also Seinfeld too. Seinfeld has a great Star Trek related episode, by the way. Seth, I know you're a Seinfeld fan. Let's see. Oh yes, yes. I'm not going to talk about Star Trek Into Darkness here. Okay, it's okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, W4. That's subsequent Khans are an echo, right? Khan. It's because it's not you. The second part. You're absolutely right, W4. Thank you very much. Yes, Khan. Yes. I love it. Yes. There's also right. Yeah. Anyway. Oh gosh, great stuff. So well done, everyone. Thank you very much. Khan. I mean, it's the same thing too. These villains and their names, they are so cool. Khan, V'ger. Could you imagine if it was another name? Just like I don't know. Like my name's Daisuke. I don't think Daisuke has the same ring as Khan. Could you imagine if Khan's name was Daisuke? The Wrath of Daisuke? Oh, that sounds terrible. No one would go to see that. Daisuke! Oh, it sounds terrible. Man, so thank good. Yeah, Khan. There's just such a wow. The Wrath of Khan. It's just what a great name. Yes. Anyway, so now let us just again. Sorry about this. I'm rushing through this now. I wish I had more time. I apologize for this. The Dave, the Wrath of Dave. That's wow. The Dave. Yeah, good job, W4. I like that. A Khan by other name. Yes. That's interesting. Anyway, so now we go to the final bits. Now, I mentioned it a little bit the last live stream. There's a whole thing about Spock a little bit overdoing it with the emphasis on by the book. But the idea here is that the Enterprise is damaged, and they did the by the book coding. Hours may seem like days. Now, if I were Khan, I'd think, oh, this sounds pretty fishy. Maybe they're using a code here, and they're trying to say instead of 2 days, they mean 2 hours. And we should just probably be aware of this, Joachim and my cat's crew. But in any event, he didn't quite get it because he was caught by surprise. This is in fact 2 hours. Still gives him not full main power, but partial main power, but it's enough to beam them back aboard. In the meantime, we get the great sequence in the Genesis cave. I mentioned my misgivings about a little bit of the science, perhaps. I'm not a scientist. I might be getting some of the details wrong, but it's still, have you ever seen the like, according to McCoy? And we have the wonderful sequence between the revelation of what happened with the Kobayashi Maru sequence and Kirk. And here we have the fact that he decided to reprogram the simulation so you could rescue the ship. And right, David catches on immediately. He cheated. He says, change the conditions of the test. This is Kirk at his finest. He's kind of got a commendation for original thinking. I don't like to lose. And then very almost savagely confronts him. So you've never faced that situation, faced death. He says, I don't believe in a no-win scenario. I don't like to lose. All right. So, in fact, actually, if you know the series, you know that, in fact, there have been a number of instances where it could be said that Kirk has faced a type of death scenario or no-win scenario, and a number of instances where he's had to confront these issues head on. But here he's taking it not just like a pro, but like a real heroic pro. This is one of the great Kirk moments, and just taking a bite out of that apple. I don't like to lose. Right? And then the great conversation in mid-transport. We are mobilized. As Spock said, but you all, Lieutenant, you all people go buy the book. Oh, hello, Mr. Spock. Oh, hi, Dr. Marcus. Hello, right? I'm gonna take these people to sick bay. Oh, buy the book, by the way. So all this stuff is it's like a Mozart opera going on at once, and so then you can also have conversations in mid transport. Wow, this is cool, very cool. And not to mention, in fact, too, I didn't mention that the design of the transport beam is also different. It's not the cone or the cylinder thing that we had in the first film, but it's now this like whoa, whoa, that kind of blending of light beams too, which is really cool. 46A, thank you, Forge Regulation 46A, about the idea of no uncoded messages on an open channel. Yes. You lied. I exaggerated. This is also a key Spock moment, a great Spock moment. I talked about great Kirk moment. This is a great Spock moment as well. And then we have, and also the cool thing about the three of them running in the hallways, just the fact that they're running. I don't know if maybe it's just the fact that it's very narrow spaces, but they seemed always to run rather slowly in my view. But in any case, that's just a cool bit, and the music is building, and then now the final confrontation. There she is. There she is. Ah, not so wounded as we are led to believe. So much the better. And it's now getting into the James Horner like percussion. And then the Mutara Nebula, and here we have the whole thing about how if you go into the nebula, all the gas stuff will interfere with the transmissions. So shields will be useless, and you can't. Phasers will be inoperative, and shields will be useless. But then this is the whole idea, because the Enterprise is damaged, but the Reliant is not so damaged, respectively or relatively speaking. But if they're both in there, then they're both on equal footing. So as Spock reminds us, sauce for the goose. Now, what sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, right? That's the implication. So the odds will be even, as he paraphrases, I think, rather brilliantly. So here we have the goose and the gander. I don't know which is which. I don't know, is the Reliant the goose and the Enterprise the gander, or is it vice versa? I don't know. But the sauce is the Mutara Nebula gas. So that's the whole thing. And they go in, and there's the final battle, and the odds are going to be even, so to speak. And we have the whole thing too, not just of two-dimensional space, but also three-dimensional space. They're traveling above and below each other, maybe not knowing it, at least the first pass, but then maybe Kirk catches on because Spock suggests that he is intelligent but inexperienced, speaking about Khan. This indicates two-dimensional thinking. So if we think three-dimensionally, we can think about the space there, and that gives Kirk and company the upper hand. But before that, we have this wonderful, beautiful pink gold swirl when the bit where where Reliant enters into the cloud. I love the bit where the guy behind Khan, like, oh, and he touches Khan's shoulder, and Khan looks like, what are you doing? But that's cool. And then tactical is inoperative. Raise the shields can't work. By this time, I didn't mention, by this time Khan has the Genesis device, the Genesis torpedo, so he could just up and go and just do whatever he wants with that, and just take the whole universe ransom or something. But he says he wants to go in, even at Joachim's please. No, sir, you have Genesis, you can do it full power. You say one thing for him, he's consistent. And so we have the final Mutara Nebula battle, as W. Forge and others have indicated so beautifully, so well. Thank you so much, my friends, for being there to talk about this great battle here. And we have they can't see each other, and then Sulu tries to fire. Did I say phasers are inoperative? That's not correct, because phasers are operative, but you can't lock on, and so that's why at the first pass under Sulu's aim, they tried to fire the phasers on the Reliant, and then Khan says after torpedoes fire, and then the after torpedo just goes into some random place, holds your course, and there's a beam of light, and it's like the music is and then it just reveals that they're on a collision course, and then this gives the opportunity for Reliant to shoot the phasers at the side there, but then he attacks again. I love this bit too because Kirk says evasive starboard. Evasive starboard. He has to turn because they're about to collide. So he's evasive starboard. Go right. Go right. And so, but I love how his line is cued so perfectly to the music, to James Horner percussion music, da, na, 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 right? So it's like this, and the line is evasive starboard. So if you cue it just right, it goes da na na, na evasive starboard, na 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 na, evasive starboard, na na na, evasive starboard. I always, when I was a kid, I don't know, I'm admitting too much, but I love that bit because it sounded so musical. So I always do like the evasive starboard, like evasive starboard, evasive starboard. So anyway, sorry. If has anyone ever done that? I just discovered yesterday, by the way, that there's this whole thing about the character of Dodgson. Is that his name, Dodgson, in Jurassic Park? And there's this whole thing about people making like songs about, Dodgson's here, Dodson's here. I didn't know that until yesterday, and so I wonder if something is similar in terms of this line evasive starboard. If that isn't a thing, it should be a thing. There should be some group of people who are making these remixes of lines from Star Trek. If that is the case, please let me know. Anyway. Sorry about this. So let me just go quickly into high gear here because there's a lot more to cover in the space of, I'd say, I have only about 10 minutes left. So then we have the final battle. Joachim is dead or almost dying. Yours is superior. After this huge giant uh, piece of stuff falls on him. Poor guy. And then we have the final showing of strength of Khan throwing it away. And it's a really tender moment, actually, between Khan and Joachim. And yours is superior. And he says this, I shall avenge you. And at this moment, I must say, this is such a great character moment of Khan, because this is at the moment where Khan is just, he's like avenging anyone, right? It's what everyone he's avenging at this point. But here he had, it's almost to the point of being, and I mean this in a very sincere way, it's almost a kind of pathetic thing that he's saying here. It's not meant for comedy. It's just meant to show how far gone he is. But he is not, as he says later, the game's not over. Even after the final pass and Enterprise has damaged the Reliant, all but to oblivion. Even down to the destruction of that thing, the destruction of one of the protrusion thing, the nacelle, I think. Da-da, da, da-da, da, da-da. This is my impression of the Reliant after it's been damned. Da-da, da-da, da-da. It's lost one of its legs, right? And then now Khan has the final thing where the only thing he has left now is the Genesis device. And he launches it. And it's on a 4-minute countdown. Although the countdown computer has like 999, I think, seconds. And it goes by really quickly. 99, it's 4 minutes, I think. And so this is the Genesis wave, or the Genesis. It's on final countdown. That's told to us by David, who's now on the bridge with that wonderful sweater that's tied around his neck there. And so yeah, the final countdown. So what's going to happen? The Enterprise has to leave, but if they don't go out in time, they're going to be caught within the explosion, and they're too going to be destroyed. So that's the whole plan. So they're trying their best to leave, but the engines have been damaged. So there's no hope. There's no hope at all. The whole people on the Enterprise are going to perish along with the Reliant unless something's done. And so here is the act of Spock, who turns, just thinks, doesn't stop to say goodbye, just goes, does his thing, goes down. After some Bones tries to stop him, he says, "You're not going in there." He says, "Perhaps you're right. What is Mr. Scott's condition?" "Well, I don't think that he..." "Sorry, Doctor, I have no time to discuss this logically. This is a key moment, and we'll know from late. We'll talk about it later. But, right, remember." And he just pushes that thing. Remember, and then I love too that moment where he just rips off the gloves of an unconscious Scotty. Remember, and goes in there. But it's this is the thing, and he does this thing inside the chamber there, opens the thing, which brings out the thing. He puts on his glove, puts his hand in the thing, goes the thing, puts the thing back, and just he does it. He does it. It's a miracle. And the mains are back online, and the thing at the on the bridge is, bless you, Scotty. Go, Sulu. And Sulu's like, huh? Huh? Da, 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 bum, bum, psha. So that's the thing that's going on here with with the end there. And so we have to bring to it. We have to go to it, this is the scene, isn't it? This is a scene that is just so powerful and so gut wrenching and so beautiful and so. This is the stuff of legend. This is one of like the top, I don't know, top 1 or 2 moments of Star Trek. I think this is the final moments between Kirk and Spock. Spock's in there. I love the bit too where Kirk realizes, oh no, something's bad after they've escaped and they see the creation of the planet in front of them. My God, Carol, look at it. He says, and he hears, well, Jim, you better get down here, hurry. And he sees the empty chair. Savick, take the con. Da-na, and you have the emergence of life edited into the foreboding of death. All at the same. He hits the guy. The guy, he bumps into the guy. He doesn't care. I love the bit where he's so in a hurry. He slides down the ladder there. Kirk does, and he just can't believe it. And he says, "No, you'll flood the whole compartment. He'll die, sir. He's dead already." Oh, Scotty has his way of finalizing things. Done. It's too late, Jim. And we have the moment. Spock, and I don't know about you, but so many things get to me in this scene. But maybe one of the things that gets to me is when Spock is down there and he hears Kirk's voice. You know that he's just weakened to the point of death. He's about to die. He stands up. Spock does. What does he do? He stands up and he straightens his uniform. He stands up and goes like, this, because he knows that he's going to face his commanding officer. Even despite all this stuff that's happening, he still has that thing of just showing that bit of respect and dignity. And he walks towards the glass, and he can't see. His eyes have probably been burnt out by the radiation. And just, ship out of danger. Yes, he says it. And you get it close on, you can see it. He's really, his skin, it's so sad to see. And he's just struggling. He says, don't grieve, Admiral. It is logical. Right? The needs of the many outweigh. And then Kirk responds, the needs of the few. He says, or the one. And he says it. I never took the Kobayashi Maru test until now. What do you think of my solution? This is his Kobayashi Maru test solution. He sacrifices himself. He says, and he goes down, crumbles down to the floor, and the James Horner music, right? Right? And he says it. I have been and always shall be your friend. Live long and prosper. Just hands, right? They're separated by glass. No, that's it. It just goes out. Right? Yeah, it always gets me. Gets me every time. Every time. I don't know about you, but it gets me every time. And so, and this must have been just a shock. I can't imagine what that theater must have been like in '82. I cannot imagine. If I was there in the theater as a kid, I would have been crying my eyes out. My gosh. And just the finality of it. And we understand too here his funeral. We're gathered here today to pay final respects to our honored dead. And that honored dead being, among others, Spock. And he says it too, that death takes place in the shadow of a new light, the sunlight of a new world, a world that our beloved comrade fought to protect and nourish. He did not see his sacrifice in vain. What does he say? Of my friend, I will only say this: of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human. And you get a cut of Savick who's crying again. The idea is she really Vulcan or Rom? Of course that comes. But of course she's emotional. She's upset, just like we all would be. And we have the procession and the torpedo. Incidentally, I don't mean to break up the tension here or anything like that, but incidentally, we understand too that torpedoes can be served also as coffins. So, are we to assume was Peter Preston in one of those torpedoes that was shot by the Enterprise after? I don't know, but anyway. So this is shot into space, and we understand it lands. It doesn't destroy, but it lands. It has a soft landing on what we now understand to be the planet that has been created of Genesis. And so we will be reminded of that later. But first, we have a final coda, the confrontation or final scene between Kirk and David, and the idea of the glasses being broken. So he can't read those final pages without, with the aid of his glasses. David comes in, the idea of facing death, and how we face death is just as important as how we face life. And these are strong words. Maybe you should begin to listen to them. And he also says, "Is that all you said?" Mainly. And then David says, "I'm proud. I'm very, very proud to be your son." And so here we have another thing, something that is emerging, life from death, things that are emerging. Not only is the Genesis planet emerging from death, the death of Khan, the death of Spock. So life is emerging from death. We also have life emerging in the form of this new potential relationship between father and son that had never been there before, that had never been recognized before. And even we see the awkwardness, that hugging. And then finally, the final wrap up as we see the smiling Dr. McCoy, and he isn't really dead as long as we remember him. And I think George Costanza, quoted it really well. I think later, was it George Costanza or someone else in the Seinfeld episode? But and I think here we have the quote. I guess it's the quote, although I'm not sure if it's the same wording. I don't think it is, but it is the reference to, let's put it that way, of the Tale of Two Cities. Right. It's something that is that a poem? Marcus asked. No, it's something that Spock was trying to tell me on my birthday. And he had the final moment. How do you feel? All the way up to this point, throughout the film, he has felt old. He has told us he's felt old, but now he says, young. I feel young. This is beautiful wrap up. Again, literally constructed. A beautiful way to end, cap the arc. The arc will then be further expanded, we know, but this is a great way to end the arc. And then we have, again, a coda among coda. There are actually two more codas. The first coda is the Genesis planet, and we see the coffin that is intact. So maybe that is a hint of things to come. And then finally, the very famous space, the final frontier, voiced by Leonard Nimoy, by Spock, which is a big deal. And their ongoing mission, not their 5-year mission, but their ongoing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life, new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Now that will change slightly when we get to part 6 and the next generation, but here it's to boldly go where no man has gone before. That's it. So that is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan in a nutshell. And I think there is there is a place, I think, for great discussion of this film. There is a place that I think it has in the hearts of many fans and the like, intense Star Trek fans, casual Star Trek fans, fans of science fiction, fans of 1980s film. And is it the best? Is it not the best? I think those are great discussions to have. But regardless of where you might fall in those discussions, I think it is undoubtedly the case that this is a thoroughly entertaining film, so neatly constructed. It might have its flaws, and I will try to acknowledge those flaws where I can. I try to today, but despite that, despite my feeling of those, this is still top of the line, top notch entertainment from head to toe. This is the stuff of cinematic legend. This is the stuff of greatness. This is how films are to me. I grew up watching this film. As I say, this is what cinema was to me. I'm so grateful. I got to have a film like Star Trek 2 to rely upon and say, this, yes, this is a film that I can't remember not ever having not seen, right? Because it's just something that it's always been there. Star Trek 2 has always been there for me. I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be able to say that. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. Now, I haven't done this film at all any justice. Not in the slightest. And for that, I sincerely apologize. And I have to go in 4 minutes. So 4 minutes, which is the Genesis countdown. My goodness. Oh, that's really chilling, right? 4 minutes. Oh gosh. So anyway, so we'll do the final 4 minutes Genesis countdown, and then go from there. So I will use this Genesis countdown to go to the chat, and we will go from there. So thank you so much. Let's see. Scott C. Scott C. Thank you very much. Yes, and you mentioned the Towering Inferno, and so I wasn't aware of that. So thank you very much for that. And I thought, my goodness, could you imagine if Kirk was caught in the Towering Inferno? What would he have done? He'd be caught in the fire and be like, I don't believe in a no-win scenario. Just run through the fire, just save everyone. Yeah, great stuff. Let's see. Analysis of sci-fi. Thank you. W. Forge, best Star Trek movie. Yes. Incredible. Yes. And you say yes. Looks like Spock gets the final world. Yes, in a nutshell. There's so much. Yeah, more you could have said. I know. I wish I could have said more, as you say. I wish I had more time, but alas, there is so much more. Again, this is just the first. So we will talk more about these other themes as they emerge in part 3. But thank you very much, my dear friend. Right. Let's see. Okay, just trying to scroll down here. As Bartholomew says, dork and proud. Yes, I am proud to be a dork. Let's see. This is the, yes, let's see here. Bartholomew says, thank you, Daisuke. As Kirk would say, that was fun. Okay, so I'll do this in my best Star Trek Generations. That was fun. Oh my. Antonia. Yes. Okay, so this is great stuff. Yes. Unity OC, thank you, my friend. You say I would rank it second amongst the TOS movies behind The Undiscovered Country. Well done. Scott Johansson says, again, thank you for great live and name mentions. I repeat, I need that Jerome Weaselberry interview part 2. Yes, you mentioned it. I know, the third man. Yes, I haven't forgotten. I'm doing. Yes. We shall see. Yes. Automatic camera planning, very cool. Mike Eli, thank you very much for the impressions. Yes, I do poor impressions. Gosh. Seth says, I'll be only present for the good live streams every other week. I'll be anxious to see how I feel about the supposed criticism. If you can, check out 3. 3 is a personal favorite of mine. I do love Search for Spock very much. Christian's hobby blog says, this is number 3 for me. Motion pictures first, 4 second, and this is third. Yes, I think it's a great 4. I can't wait to talk about 4. Do you guys like Italian? Yes, no, yes, no. Yes, I love Italian, and so do you. Yes. I saw that in the theater too. It was great. Yeah. Let's see. Samuel Stevens, guys, can I leave a link to my Hitchcock ranking in the video comments? Yeah, of course. Please do so. Go for it, my friend. You can. Tell me more time. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I can't do it I can't do a Savick voice, but I hope. I should have done my David thing. I should have taken this off and tied it around my neck there. It'd be like, distance to Reliant, 4,000 kilometers. And then Sue was like, we're not going to make it, are we? He looks to David. David's like, this was it. Yeah, we're not going to make it. That's what I just, yes. Bless you, Scotty. Go, Sulu. All right. All right, I have to go, my friends. So sorry to cut this short. Next week, next Sunday, Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. I will do my best. I will try to do better to make it a more organized discussion. I was all over the place today, so I apologize for that. But I'll try to do that conversation a bit better. In the meantime, my friends, please continue to be happy and healthy and well. And please continue to watch a lot of great, great movies, including Star Trek movies, including rewatching Star Trek II, the Wrath of what? The Wrath of who? Wrath of what? It is, yes, the Wrath of Khan. One more time, Star Trek II, the Wrath of Khan.